Chapter 801. I have many little secrets, little secrets. I have many little secrets, little secrets. I'm not telling you, I'm not telling you, the ancient nursery rhyme swayed in the clouds. It was out of tune, unscrupulous, and carried a little hoarseness and difficulty of the voice-changing period. However, when it spread far away, the lingering sound turned into muffled thunder, overlapping and humming. The empty clouds actually had the reverberation effect of singing karaoke. Luo Nan, who was singing the nursery rhyme loudly, was still leaping up and down amidst the clouds. He somersaulted several times in a row. He had the momentum of wreaking havoc in the heavens. Only when it was tired of tossing and turning did it spread its limbs and float freely in the depths of the clouds. At this moment, the sun above his head was also releasing its restless pressure in the form of light and heat. Luo Nan half closed his eyes and felt the slight warmth on his face. His mind calmed down a bit, and he felt that his actions were preposterous. He felt that it was even more laughable. He really did laugh out loud, laughing until he was out of breath. In the end, he let out a howl of, ah ah ah. It wasn't until he roared out the last bit of air in his lungs that his body curled up, his face flushed red, and tears flowed from the corners of his eyes that he finally stopped. He returned to his sprawled state and gasped for breath. Luo Nan no longer had any misgivings. The people who could obstruct him were all dead. The cloud world had finally returned to his control. This was supposed to be his, because this was a magical world discovered by his mother and father. Luo Nan adhered to this logic. Because of this, Luo Nan's heart was weighed down by a rock when Gong Qi was here. He needed to be careful and hide here and there. Now that Gong Qi was thoroughly dead, Luo Nan's stifled heart rumbled and swelled, rolling up 1,000 emotions. He no longer had a reason to restrain himself. However, this place was too deserted. He did not receive any response. Would it be the same in the future? He followed the clues of his parents and stepped into one realm after another. He thought that he could touch more of their aura, but when he overcame all the difficulties and was moved by his family's rapid improvement, his rationality reflected the reality around him. In the end, it was just a mass of clouds and emptiness. Luo Nan's eyelids drooped down a bit more. But even so, a bright red glow still pressed in between his half-lidded eyelashes. The stimulating hue was like a dark flame smothered under new charcoal. It quietly devoured the fuel that had just been added amidst the fine crackling sounds. His heart was not at peace. Even though he had just gotten out of his stressful job and vented his frustrations in this boundless world of clouds, the flames in his heart were still burning. Luo Nan opened his eyes once more. His pupils constricted as he stared at the great wheel of the sun within the layer of clouds and the special environment of the void. The great wheel of the sun appeared slightly distorted. Speaking of which, the emotions that had just been accumulated, released, and then reignited were closely related to the toy above his head. Looking at it for too long wouldn't hurt the eyes, but it would burn the heart. Luo Nan was unable to remain calm, but he was able to maintain a calm mind. Soon, he made a decision. Well, since my condition isn't good, I'll take a break for now. Speaking of which, how long had it been since he'd last slept since he'd carried out the plan to kill Gong Qi? 70 hours? 80 hours? Go to sleep, maybe you will have a good dream that you don't want to wake up from. These thoughts flashed through Luo Nan's mind twice before he closed his eyes and soon fell asleep. Luo Nan's body lost control of his consciousness during his deep sleep. He naturally sunk, but he only sunk a few meters before he seemed to lose his proper weight. He rose up amidst the whistling astral winds, but he didn't appear to be light as a feather. Instead, there were multiple forces acting on him. He came and went, swaying and swaying, forming a kind of basic dynamic equilibrium. Time slowly passed, but there was no difference between day and night in the cloud world. The position of the great wheel of the sun in the deep sky didn't change. Only the turbulent flow of the clouds transformed into a myriad of shapes. Over time, it became monotonous. The environment of the cloud world seemed to be this monotonous forever, but there were always a few variables in between. After a period of time, a red shadow suddenly flew over near the area where Luo Nan slept peacefully. It was a mushed-mouth ape. Outsiders aside, this was the only living species that could be seen in the cloud world. It had an enormous body that was over 7 meters tall, and it was wrapped in layers of scales and muscles. It was as if its brain had been hollowed out, and its deep red pupils swiveled on its sunken head. It was separated by a distance of several thousand meters, yet it was still able to quickly lock onto a target drifting up and down in the depths of the clouds. The prey was confirmed. Saliva flowed from the area of the mushed-mouth ape's mouth and nose. The multiple signals coming from the body of the prey stimulated the appetite of the mushed-mouth ape. The mushed-mouth ape paused for a moment high up in the distance under the urge of its desire. Then it accelerated with a rumble, diving down towards Luo Nan's location. The distance of several thousand meters shrank by over 90% in the blink of an eye. Luo Nan's eyes were still closed, and his breathing was long and even. He was in a state of deep sleep, seeming to be completely unaware of the crisis and changes occurring in the outside world. And at this time, the surrounding clouds stirred slightly. Rays of light refracted, and it was as if a bubble had burst. Rui Wen's slender figure came out from within. She turned from incorporeal to solid, blocking between Luo Nan and the mushed-mouth ape. Just from visual effects alone, Rui Wen and the mushed-mouth ape had an enormous difference in body size. However, she was calm and silent from the inside out. She allowed the astral winds at high altitudes to blow at her school uniform skirt that reached her knees. She only used her gaze to lock onto the oncoming vicious creature. The surrounding clouds and the void suddenly dimmed. Rui Wen's eyes moved slightly, but she still hadn't made any substantial movements. The changes occurred on the level of light perception and color. It was a bit like the clouds were blocking the sun, covering it with a layer of shadow. But to be more precise, it was more like the dark gray color had seeped in, confusing the primary colors and messing up the foundation. There was a limit to this round of changes. Rui Wen and Luo Nan's positions practically didn't change at all. Compared to the changing environment of the void, their positions appeared exceptionally bright. The malevolent body of the mushed-mouth ape that was pouncing over seemed to be completely soaked in the dark gray color. There wasn't a single corner that was able to escape unscathed, both inside and out. The reason why Luo Nan felt this way was because the body of the mushed-mouth ape was turning transparent from Rui Wen's point of view. It was distorting and growing, and the degree of distortion was growing greater and greater. At this moment, aside from the rushing clouds, there were only empty clouds. It was as if an invisible yet terrifying maelstrom was embedded within. An enormous tearing force existed within the maelstrom, as well as a magical power that could erase reality. When everything was normal before, the physical distance between the mushed-mouth ape and Rui Wen was around 30 to 40 meters at most. With its speed, it could collide with Rui Wen in the blink of an eye. But when the void underwent a change, this distance of 30 to 40 meters became an insurmountable moat. It could isolate anyone who tried to cross it, and it could even devour them cleanly. The mushed-mouth ape let out a hiss from its mouth. The sound waves deformed within the distorted void, intermittently. Sometimes it was sharp and ear-piercing, sometimes it was muffled and dull. Sometimes it seemed to draw near, and sometimes it seemed to be far beyond the heavens. Rui Wen, who had recently been studying music, was able to imagine the complex physical environment that caused this series of changes. And all of this happened in the empty clouds. It could only be said that the person behind her had caused the surrounding world to become abnormal. Rui Wen made a rare comparison with common sense, but her thoughts soon vanished like smoke in thin air. This was because Luo Nan let out a long sigh at this time, waking up from his sleep. His own breathing seemed to be affected by the abnormal world around him. It was as muffled as thunder. The mushed-mouth ape, which had already been distorted beyond recognition, suddenly disintegrated amidst the sound of thunder. It transformed into a mass of steaming ash-gray smoke, which was engulfed by the clouds high in the sky. It then dissipated without a trace. Rui Wen. Skipped class. School's over. Really? There's no sun or moon in the clouds. Luo Nan's sunwheel hovered above his head as he vaguely spoke words that lacked sincerity. His consciousness was still not completely awake. It was as if his body was situated in a gravity-free environment. He did a roll high in the air, somewhat clumsily switching to a half-sitting, half-standing posture. A gale just so happened to attack from high up in the sky at this time. The surging clouds and the young girl's pleated skirt rose and fell in a rhythmic manner. The surrounding gray background perfectly reflected a section of snow-white skin. One could feel the exquisite texture even with the naked eye. Hiss. There's a problem with the angle. Huh. Luo Nan's body actually broke out in a thin layer of cold sweat under the gaze of Rui Wen's clear and cold eyes. He subconsciously grinned and revealed a smile. I'm saying that the coupling between me and multiple spacetimes isn't too perfect. It's like the gears have gone astray. I need to constantly adjust them. You didn't scare me just now, right? Luo Nan locked gazes with Rui Wen after he finished speaking. He knew that he had said something stupid. Did this little girl have the concept of fear in her heart? Okay, I'm saying thank you for your help. But right now you still need to prioritize your studies. Don't split your thoughts too much with me. What if you suddenly disappear in school? I'm afraid that a lot of people will have headaches. Rui Wen lowered her head. She was quiet and obedient. This made Luo Nan feel even more embarrassed. The feeling of loneliness and heartburn he felt before he went to sleep had unknowingly been washed away. He subconsciously reached out his hand to touch Rui Wen's head. But during this process, he heard the muscles and joints of his body emit strange creaking sounds. Something was wrong. Luo Nan was already used to this sight. See? Every time I find my balance, I have to break it up and start over with a bit of external stimulation. There's basically no problem with the God gear aspect. Only the body gear is involved in the fundamental physical restrictions. It's simply impossible to adjust it to the right place in one go. Also, the coupled spacetime environment is like being covered with several thick blankets. Especially the misty labyrinth. There's no blanket at all. It's the type where fluff and cotton fly everywhere. Every time it shakes, it's especially hard to clean up. Luo Nan chattered endlessly. He mainly talked about how he integrated the laws of the misty labyrinth and even the spacetime laws of Earth through his own family's large coordinate system before and after he killed Gong Qi. He also talked about the Blood Soul Temple domain and other small plugins to construct the Luo clan domain. As for the unlucky mushed-mouth ape from before, it simply wasn't worth discussing. With the current construction of this domain, digesting Gong Qi's gambling capital shouldn't be a problem. The most important thing is to constantly adjust and deal with the various bumps in the integration process. Then again, the imbalance between body and soul is an old problem. This core problem isn't something that can be solved in a short time. It's fine to just walk. Right now, the most important thing is to explore and discover. Come. Let's talk inside. Humph. I don't need your help right now. As they spoke, the gray void in front of the two melted and caved in, revealing a gap in the door that could accommodate two people entering at the same time. Look. This Luo clan sandwich domain of mine is basically able to perfectly fulfill the function of a transfer station. Luo Nan relied on the mutual interference and influence of his own structure and the various spacetime environments. He didn't need Rui Wen's help to easily open a passage to the misty labyrinth. There's no problem on Earth either. It's just that it's a bit troublesome to regulate and adjust afterwards. Fortunately, the cloud world has a special nature. The rules aren't strict enough. Rui Wen didn't say anything. She allowed Luo Nan to hold her shoulders as they stepped through the door. They saw the misty labyrinth once more. It was no longer a scene of sand and dust wreaking havoc. At the very least, the area in front of them was like this. What assaulted their faces was a mist like morning mist. It inherited the grayish-white hue of the Luo clan sandwich domain, and it was even thicker. A twisted shadow faintly appeared in front of them. At first glance, it looked as sinister and terrifying as a dancing ghost. TSK. It's gotten dirty again. Luo Nan blew a breath of air as he spoke. A gale swept forth, and the mist that filled the air dissipated completely in the span of a breath. Luo Nan explained, every time I fine-tune it, this place becomes a pile of chicken feathers. There's nothing I can do about it. The fragmented laws of the labyrinth permeate everywhere. In addition to my sandwich domain, this is the only place where large-scale adjustments can be made. It's like a bearing. No, it's simply lubricating oil. There's no stable form to speak of. Wherever there's something wrong, I'll pour a jug of it. Ruiwen smiled faintly. She could roughly feel the humor that Luo Nan deliberately stirred up. She didn't speak. She just looked at the enormous object that appeared in the central region after the mist dissipated. The shape and silhouette over there clearly had the appearance of a large tree, and it was the kind that was withered. A withered tree. Ruiwen was far too familiar with this. She went to Gear on the north bank every day and looked at the sandbar across the lake. There was a withered tree like this. It stood all alone above the lake, and it hid the secrets of Luo Nan's parents. You've recovered quite well, right? Luo Nan led Ruiwen over to the withered tree. Ruiwen was a bit cautious as she walked within the large hall. This was because there were far too many details within this special space for her. Every inch of movement seemed to touch fine and densely woven spider silk, but she couldn't see the actual object. It felt weird. However, she was able to sense that this place had a more realistic feeling than before. The so-called large hall was originally a trap set up for Gong Qi. It was piled up from the fragments of the misty maze. If it was said that this place was just an enclosed piece of land back then a rough house had been constructed at the very least. Luo Nan was quite satisfied with this rough house right now. This place is equivalent to a multi-purpose hall. It can be used as a reception room, an activity area, a laboratory. Yeah, it still doesn't meet the requirements to support the operation of the instruments. Of course, the simplest way is to use it as a battlefield, but I'm a bit reluctant to do so. It was probably because of the tree hole. Ruiwen's gaze focused on the strange object in the shape of a withered tree in front of her. Looking at it from a close distance, there were still some differences between this toy and the real thing. It couldn't be considered lifelike. However, everything here was pieced together from fragmented configuration fragments. It was tens of millions of times more complex than mosaics and building blocks. It was an extraordinary large project, and all of this had been constructed within a short few dozen hours. Luo Nan was much more calm and brilliant in this domain. Come, let's go in and take a look. The function is the most important thing. Luo Nan clearly had the intention of showing off. He knocked on the outer bark of the withered tree, and just like when they entered the misty maze, a door that could accommodate two people side by side opened up. It quietly waited for them to enter. Ruiwen had entered the tree hole quite a few times in this space and time. However, she had entered through the passageway at the bottom of the lake in Gear's building. It was quite refreshing to directly pass through the tree trunk. This also reminded her that this place was quite different from the real withered tree. The judgment she just made became a bit fuzzy after entering the first floor. The first floor was the layout of the lounge. Under the dusky light, the narrow and exquisite layout was practically perfectly reproduced before her eyes. For a second, Ruiwen nearly believed that Luo Nan had brought her back through the barrier of space and time, returning to the tree hole of the withered tree sandbar. These are just decorations. If it were truly completed, then it wouldn't look like this. Luo Nan reached out to touch the inner wall of the tree hole, and waves of ripples actually appeared. The current functional construction is mainly concentrated on the upper level. Come come come. Big brother will show you something new. Ruiwen followed Luo Nan up. She had just taken a few steps, but she had yet to truly enter the second floor when a change suddenly occurred in her 5 senses and 6 senses. Ruiwen blinked her eyes. It was as if she had accidentally fallen into a starry sky. The surroundings were gloomy and deep. Hundreds of thousands of cold stars were sparsely arranged. Her sense of distance in space became a bit fuzzy. She subconsciously took another step before she could find her true senses. When she calmed her mind, she no longer felt like she had sunk into the starry sky. She only felt that it was a sensory effect similar to virtual reality. Her gaze quickly focused and locked onto the most conspicuous region in the center of this starry sky. The light there was the brightest, but it was more reserved. There were light regions and dark spots. There was a relatively smooth outline, and there was even a bit of a slightly diffused halo. At first glance, it looked like an astronomical scene that had undergone post-processing. It represented a distant and enormous galaxy. "Come here. Look carefully." Luo Nan called Ruiwen forward. The feeling it gave off changed when she looked at it from a different angle. It transformed into a translucent substance that was even smaller than the palm of her hand. It possessed a distinct texture. "This is the core work area. As for this little thing, it's my latest work. Currently, I'll call it lens." Ruiwen drew closer. She was quite interested in this so-called lens. Well, Luo Nan attached great importance to this matter. Of course she had to pay close attention to it. Upon careful observation, this little toy really did have the meaning of a lens. At the very least, it was quite similar to the teaching aids that teachers brought to physics classes. Aside from its transparency. Then, was it a concave lens or a convex lens? Luo Nan wasn't in a hurry to explain the marvels of the lens to Ruiwen. Instead, he extended his hand and streaked across the surrounding gloomy region. His fingertips seemed to stir the specks of light of the stars that blurry perception of distance. A smile blossomed on his face, becoming more and more splendid. "Ruiwen. Did you know? This is the true face of the hollow tree. It's something that I built according to Mom and Dad's design. The hollow tree vehicle at the end of the corridor in Grandpa's laboratory in the wilderness can only be considered an embryonic form. It's far behind this version. After all, this is the result of my father's many years of dedicated research after returning from the wilderness." "Hey! Have I mentioned this matter before?" Ruiwen shook her head slightly. I must have been too busy a few days ago. I forgot to tell you. Let me tell you. There's also Jerry's scenes here. It's super complicated." Luo Nan entered into nagging mode. He talked about whatever came to mind. It was just as he said. The matter itself was very complicated. It had experienced a long period of time, and space had jumped frequently. Some of it was still conjecture. The logic was rather chaotic when it was expressed. It was quite laborious to listen to. But Ruiwen only needed to understand that Luo Nan's mood was better than before. His mood was more positive. This was enough for her. "So, that old man of mine made this arrangement. He made it too complicated. I still don't understand the twists and turns inside. But no matter how you look at it, I'm lucky. The withered tree sandbar, formatting theory, configuration knowledge, and Jerry's database. All of these conditions were put together. They really pieced together a result, and in the end, it was passed into my hands. Maybe this is fate." Ruiwen met Luo Nan's gaze and gave a light, "Yep." She felt that this should be the answer Luo Nan wanted to hear the most. Sure enough, Luo Nan revealed a smile again. He extended his hand to rub Ruiwen's head, temporarily ending this topic. "I'll investigate and straighten out the situation inside later. Let's first look at the most practical." The information he left behind was extremely practical and extremely crucial. I've talked about that 100-year sequence question bank before, right? It's good stuff. And it's the basic level of general education. Ruiwen, you also need to learn it. It's far more advanced than what is taught in school. Right now I firmly believe that a highly developed civilization system certainly exists in the distant starry sky beyond Earth. It has already established an intersection with us, and the possibility of further intercommunication will continue to increase in the future. If such a day truly comes, we can learn and understand its information ahead of time. We can be a step ahead of others and seize the initiative. Luo Nan adopted the posture of apparent lecturing, and Rui Wen nodded obediently. She cooperated extremely well. The content inside should be extremely large and complex. It involves all aspects of society's construction, but there's also an inexplicable seal. It's very unpleasant. Luckily, it seems to be gradually unlocking right now. When I did the questions before, there was only the content of configuration theory. But I've secretly unlocked the knowledge of creation in the past 2 days. I've looked at some of it, and it's extremely useful. As for why it's unlocked, I suspect that it's directly related to this. Luo Nan pointed at the lens in the middle of the work area and winked at Rui Wen. How about it? Do you want to give it a try first? Huh. This toy is just a half-finished product, but it's extremely interesting. I can't explain the specifics in a short amount of time. You can come over and give it a try. It's very interesting. Really? Right now Luo Nan looked like a little kid who couldn't wait to recommend his favorite games and toys to his friends. He hated that he couldn't blow the lens to the skies. There were many words that Rui Wen didn't quite understand, but she absolutely wouldn't refuse his request. Rui Wen leaned her upper body forward once more, closing the distance between her and the lens. She observed it seriously. However, she was still completely confused as to how to operate it. She tilted her head and cast an inquiring gaze at Luo Nan. Luo Nan laughed. Wait for me to teach you. It's actually very simple. Your sensing ability is this good. You just need to concentrate. There's a lot of interesting information within this little thing. It's true that it's a bit hard to understand, but I can explain it to you at any time. Rui Wen hesitated for a few seconds. She was mainly trying to extract the true meaning of instructions from Luo Nan's words. She stared earnestly at the lens before her eyes. She looked beneath the translucent surface, at the endlessly flowing rays of light, as well as the faintly discernible patterns and dark spots. These were all in the midst of dynamic changes. She couldn't see any pattern for the time being. Luo Nan hurriedly corrected her. I don't use my eyes. I don't use my fleshly body's intuition. Oh, I can't completely break away from this. I need to use the synesthesia of my mental senses. My thoughts are that the collected information can be understood, categorized, and utilized by ordinary people. After all, the workload is too great. It would be even better if it could be converted into a code that can be recognized by machines. Luckily, Rui Wen was able to understand his messy explanation in the end. She still didn't say a word. Her eyes stared at the lens, but what pierced through it was no longer her line of sight. Instead, it was her soul strength, which allowed her to perceive all things. The instant this power made contact with the lens, Rui Wen practically instinctively utilized the technique of body and soul fusion. She searched for the special frequency of fluctuations of the marvelous creation before her eyes, forming a sufficient interference with it. In the blink of an eye, the light waves and shadows projected by the lens transformed into an incomparably rich and enormous flood of information. And it was still growing with an explosive momentum. Even with Rui Wen's special state, she subconsciously furrowed her brows. Careful. Careful. Luo Nan also jumped in fright. He never expected that Rui Wen's soul strength interference would be this efficient and direct. Her compatibility with the lens was top-notch. He was afraid that the little girl would be injured by the flood of information, so he hurriedly adjusted the flow of information from the side. Even at this time, Rui Wen still turned her head and smiled at Luo Nan. Only then did she truly gather her mind and discern the core image within the flood of information. Luo Nan stared nervously. A dozen seconds passed before he finally couldn't help but ask, "How is it? Is there anything that can be described?" Conflict. Collision. Excellent. Luo Nan clapped his hands. That's it. Is there more? It's extremely dense. It's like rain, wind, and water droplets colliding together. Yes, yes, yes. Continue. Continue. There should be two directions. Two kinds of power. They mix together, intensely clashing. They ceaselessly strive to eject things, but they're also absorbing. Luo Nan suddenly stopped talking. It was also at this time that Rui Wen saw a series of changes occur to the lens, which was in full interference with her soul strength. The edges of the originally clear silhouette blurred. There was a clear tendency towards granulation as a whole. It was as if a layer of frosted sand had been added to it. At first glance, it looked more like a mass of glistening nebula. And the structure of this mass of nebula became unstable. It was restless. There seemed to be a continuous explosion of conflict within it, so it swayed irregularly. It didn't have a clear direction of rotation. Yes, the lens was changing, and it was a corresponding change that occurred with Rui Wen's perception. It practically reproduced the scene that she described perfectly. Don't be affected. Continue. Luo Nan commanded. Rui Wen was a bit startled. Then she closed her eyes, unaffected by the changes in the lens. She used pure soul strength to sense and restore the image contained within the flood of information. Soon, she captured a crucial point: two kinds of power are in the center. They dominate everything. They are also converging. Aside from collision, there is also a kind of resonant pulsation. Rui Wen recalled an observation experiment from a biology class not too long ago. She found a ready-made example: it's like a pregnant rabbit. The heartbeat of the fetus. Luo Nan gasped in admiration, perfect. Actually, Rui Wen still had a few opinions, but it was rather difficult for her to find the corresponding words to describe it. She stopped and opened her eyes once more. The lens no longer looked like a lens at all. It had completely transformed into the shape of a nebula. The center was shrunken, yet it was the brightest. The periphery was in the shape of dust and mist. It seemed that it wanted to pull out a few spiral arms, but it gave up because of its unstable state. Do you know what it corresponds to? The mist labyrinth. Rui Wen already understood. Yes. It's the reflection of the mist labyrinth. Of course, it's depicted by our perception. It's based on the signal waves that come from every corner of the mist labyrinth. They're collected by the tree hole, magnified, and gathered within the lens. Then we analyze, categorize, and reproduce them. Luo Nan faced Rui Wen and revealed a large grin. It's a very useful tool, right? Rui Wen nodded. Luo Nan snapped his fingers, and a projection of a double helix diagram appeared to one side of the lens nebula. Oh, this is the design blueprint of the tool. It's the key information left behind by my old man. Luo Nan enlarged the projection in a timely manner as he spoke. Now they could see that the structure was similar to the double helix of DNA. The nodes that connected the two long strands were absolutely not base pairs like ACTG. Instead, they were complex three-dimensional diagrams that were so complex and precise that it made one's eyes pop. Similarly, they were paired in pairs. They were linked to each other, displaying an extremely direct correspondence. These two chains. One is a collection of tool diagrams. The other is a collection of surveying and mapping drawings. Every version of the tool should be a version of surveying and mapping results. Every link represents a set of surveying and mapping experiments. I looked at the dates. The earliest one can be traced back to the year 75, and the last one stopped at the year 90, June. There have been several hundred iterations in 15 years, and there are over 2,000 sets of experiments altogether. What is this? Rui Wen was silent, and Luo Nan answered his own question: a treasure trove. A treasure trove of cognition. We can make adjustments according to the results of the experiments. We can see what the world we live in is like in the end. Luo Nan waved his hand heavily. In the central region, the structure of the lens nebula, which appeared to be rather regular, instantly warped. It was as if it had collided with a layer of barrier. In fact, there really was a faintly discernible arc of light that pressed against the edge of the lens nebula. There were even traces of a depression, forming a direct view of the scene of the collision. We are unable to describe the true structure of spacetime. We can only reduce the dimensions to deal with it. However, I think that it is already quite close to the truth. The relationship between the fog maze and the local spacetime of the Earth is probably like this. An intimate contact on the spacetime level. The shattered fog maze is sufficiently interfering with the spacetime of the Earth. Oh, there are also interference and friction fronts. As Luo Nan spoke, the outermost layer of the lens nebula lit up with a thin ring of light, the cloud world. Chapter 802. Perhaps it was because the director of the Environmental Affairs Office bowed and apologized from a more appropriate angle, even God was moved. At noon on May 6, a sudden torrential rain poured down, quickly washing away the atmospheric dust created by the fireworks of the music festival last night. Correspondingly, the Jade Lights sailing ceremony at the Saka cruise terminal had to end in a sorry state. The respectable gentlemen and ladies waving to each other on and off the boat quickly disappeared under the blooming umbrellas. The deep flute sounded, and the Jade Light sailed out of the cruise ship dock. Yin-Lu stood in the crowd and controlled the information projection on her retina. It was a list of passengers on the Jadeite Light. He didn't find anything unusual on the list. If he had to nitpick, it would probably be that there weren't too many important people on the luxury cruise that had just left. In fact, among the people on the ship, there were not many who were qualified to participate in the high-level high seas auction in 10 days. A real big shot would never follow the rules of others. Just like the Lord she served. However, it was precisely this kind of person who truly dominated the course of events. The ceremony ended in a hurry. In the chaotic scene caused by the heavy rain, people could finally release their true emotions. Yin-Lu heard many sighs of relief. In her view, it wasn't only because the cruise had just left, but also because it was out of everyone's sight. At this moment, his wristband vibrated. Flight NH5753 has arrived. Yin-Lu also let out a long sigh and unknowingly blended into the surroundings. Emoya, who had been in a rush for 5 days, returned safely as the direct flight from Saka City to Xia City landed. At this point, Yin-Li's 2 major missions in coming to Osaka City, finding Snake Tongue and protecting Emoya, could be considered to have been smoothly completed. Yin-Lu made a summary of her own work. He didn't play any key role, and his support position was still stable. Coupled with the departure of the Jade Light cruiser, the stormy Ban City should be able to calm down for a while, right? That might not be the case. Over the past 2 days, even Yin-Lu, an outsider, had noticed the subtle and tense atmosphere in Ban City. Compared to pure perception, some changes on the market level might be more convincing. His wristband vibrated continuously. He received a short message and an instant message almost at the same time. Yin-Lu carefully read the message before picking up the call. Hello, Mr. Opin. The voice on the other side was cold and alienated. Ms. Yin, the handover work with you is going very smoothly. At present, the yacht has sailed into the Ohori River. It is expected to arrive at Beishan Lake in an hour. Yes, Mr. Opin. We have confirmed it. Yin-Lu slightly deviated from the direction of the crowd and approached the edge of the viewing platform. This was the highest point of the cruise ship dock. She could see that in the opposite direction of the emerald light that had just set sail, there was a small and exquisite private yacht going against the current along the man-made flood channel that had been dug after the war. The exterior of the yacht had the same design style as the Ray that had been docked for overhaul. They did indeed belong to the same manufacturer and the same production line, so they could be considered as sisters. Having such a yacht would allow Mr. Luo Nan to adapt to his living environment without any obstructions. Even if he didn't care about it. Being able to quickly find a substitute and successfully purchase it at an unexpectedly low price was mostly due to the treacherous atmosphere in Ban City over the past 2 days. As the representative of the owner of the yacht, Mr. Opin took this money-losing business to heart. He wasn't in the mood to be polite at all. I hope that you will follow the agreement and pay the final payment on time and accurately. Okay, Mr. Opin. We will definitely pay all the relevant funds in strict accordance with your requirements. In fact, another payment has already been made. Yes. Mr. Opin confirmed the change in the account, and his tone also subtly changed. A second passed before he spoke once more. Right now is the transaction window period. I hope that our cooperation can continue. Of course. The call was soon ended, but another message came in soon after. It was still from Mr. Opin. The message contained the coordinates of an address that didn't exist in the secular world, as well as the time. Yin-lu smiled. Her gaze shifted away from the river and fell into the depths of the boundless curtain of rain. Just looking at this yacht transaction alone, it was nothing more than an exchange of luxury goods. It was purely an act of consumption. But as a qualified businesswoman, Yin-lu also made full use of the other conveniences brought about by the transaction. For example, information. Okira Rongsan was an important figure in the Great Zay Church, a local church in Ban City. The Great Zay Church had already existed before the Third World War, and it was a rare veteran that could be revitalized in the era of distortion. In the span of a few decades, it had changed from a simple faith group to a mysterious church that could produce supernatural powers. In the tangled and complicated territory of Ban City, they had their own faction of power. Dealing with such an old-school church, especially when it came to matters involving the transfer of large amounts of funds abroad, could often reveal a lot of interesting things. During the transfer process of the yacht, the Great Zay Church behind Okira Rongsan had indeed given a large discount and reduced the transfer fee. And most of the discounts were lost in the secret circulation of funds. In other words, in addition to money, the Great Zay Church also needed to use Yin Li's financial channels. Moreover, they also made some hints, asking Yin Lu if she wanted to take over some of the real estate by Beishan Lake. Even some special materials that weren't easy to transport. This was simply the standard mode of quickly liquidating assets and the escape of important figures. During the transaction negotiations, Yin-lu also heard some subtle rumors from various relevant channels. Some were evidence, and some were counterexamples that needed further analysis. But no matter what, it was better than nothing. Without a considerable transaction as a starting point, she wouldn't be able to fight her way into this closed ecosystem. And now, the information in Ban City could be compared with T City, Xia City, and even Chan City. She could dig out a lot of sensitive information from them. A part of it was directly related to the Amaterasu Church. Yin-lu had personally witnessed a series of battles of wits and courage in a certain laboratory with Luo Nan's support. Of course, she understood what Luo Nan was concerned about. Mr. Luo Nan would be interested in these things. After finishing her work at the dock, Yin-lu turned around and blended into the crowd. Soon, she entered the parking lot of the port. Just as she got into the car, her wristband vibrated again and automatically switched to the internal channel of the Great Zay Church. These mercenaries from T City really can't be trusted. When things come to a head, each and every one of them is indecisive. No, they've always been staring at the money. They have no fear for the blood flame will. Yes, yes. Old Jiang, you're right. Especially that Cadman. He's the root of the prisoners and has the temperament of a fox. When the first Ablatum was around, he was extremely good. But now that he's in seclusion, he's greedy to no end. He's fiddling with the T-City branch to the point where it's leaking air everywhere. He's infiltrating everywhere into a sieve. He's clearly using the capital of the Great Zay Church to do that extracorporeal circulation. Shouldn't we deal with this kind of person early on? Shouldn't we just wait for him to bite us in the back? Yin-lu signaled the driver to go back. Then, she closed the rear compartment and responded warmly, Old Jiang, don't get angry. Don't get angry and harm your body. My body is very hard. Even if he really bites me, he'll break all his teeth. But the key right now is the backbone. Recently, the first Ablatum has been paying less and less attention to mundane matters. I know she's brooding over the matter in Xia City, but when it comes to hard power, we can't compare. This isn't something that can be made up for in a year or two. Jiang Yuanjun chattered for nearly 10 minutes before hanging up. Yin Lu shook her head and used her knuckles to scrape the space between her eyebrows. She let out a long sigh, but the breath she exhaled wasn't able to unfurl the lines between her eyebrows. Compared to the smooth progress in Ban City, the situation in D City's headquarters wasn't optimistic. The Blood Flame Order had just moved not too long ago. Their foundation was still shallow. They were surrounded by wolves, like tigers eyeing their prey. On the surface, the call just now was Jiang Yuanjun's old pedant complaining. But in reality, he was transmitting information. He had also misled them regarding the possible eavesdropping. The person Jiang Yuanjun spoke of was Cadman. He was the local representative of the Order's power in D City. Perhaps he was just a snake and a rat at the moment, but as long as this local snake was around, there was always the worry of an unforeseen event that would lead a wolf into the house. Currently, Chan City was leading a global, major investigation operation. This gave Cadman an excellent opportunity. During the sensitive period of time that may involve despicable murder, the Blood Flame Order's solidified configuration in the Abyss region, the Blood Soul Temple, was indeed in a highly active state. Naturally, the Blood Flame Order was included in the pending investigation list. If you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. What's more, this side wasn't necessarily innocent. Yes, the major investigation operation in Ban City also gave some people an excuse to use force. It felt like these few sides really had a tacit understanding. Yin Lu sighed again and leaned back. Every time she faced this kind of problem, she had no choice but to admit that she still couldn't be considered someone who could take charge of an area by herself. Just thinking about it made her feel mentally and physically exhausted. From the most realistic point of view, this wasn't the level and problem she should be thinking about. At times like this, she especially missed Mrs. Halder and the young boss she had just attached herself to. If those two were here, what would her job be? Feeding the fish. Yin Lu shook her head. She took out a small ornament-like crystal ball from a secret pocket she kept close to her body. She gently and carefully rubbed it in the center of her palm, feeling the indescribably subtle tactile sensation. The inside of the crystal ball seemed to be sealed with a cloud of smoke. It also seemed like a turbid liquid. It was ash gray in color. And there was a flat living creature swimming back and forth within it. It was the devil ray that Luo Nan had tamed. This mutant possessed a terrifying killing range in Luo Nan's hands, but right now it was like a pure plaything. She couldn't see any threat from it. Being able to control this existence, at least temporarily, gave Yin Lu an enormous sense of satisfaction and stability. It was also through this method that she could truly feel the existence of the backbone. No matter what, as long as she was able to attach herself to Luo Nan, who could easily create such miracles, then she and the Blood Flame Order would have a bright future. Yin Lu raised the crystal ball in front of her eyes and observed it seriously. She followed Luo Nan's arrangements and grazed the Devil Ray twice in the past 2 days. The Devil Ray's appetite was great, and it was very obedient. But for some unknown reason, the colorless and transparent filler inside grew more and more turbid. It constantly switched between a gaseous state and a liquid state. The change was extremely obvious. She remembered that her teacher had said that the crystal ball was just a speculum. The Devil Ray's true sealed location was within a spatial fault. What did this change foretell? Yin Lu was puzzled no matter how she thought about it. Her thoughts drifted back and forth. Plus, she hadn't rested well recently. Her mind was exhausted, and she actually fell asleep in the back seat of the car. And then she had a dream. In the dream, Yin Li's consciousness arrived at the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss district. She maintained a subtle state of half-consciousness. She had a bit of independent thought, so much so that she couldn't determine whether this was a pure dream or a cultivation instinct brought about by her decades of life as a priest. Yin Lu only knew that her consciousness was floating in the lava lake of the stone forest at the lowest level of the Blood Soul Temple's structure. She was at a loss, not knowing where to go. Suddenly, a cluster of light appeared. The outline of the light was like the crystal ball she was playing with in her hand. It emitted a bright and precious light, becoming the most eye-catching existence in the turbid and chaotic lava lake. Yin Li's consciousness couldn't help but shift over. She was pulled by the light source and coiled a few times. She vaguely felt that it wasn't some sort of crystal ball, but a mirror. Her image was reflected on the mirror, but it wasn't too realistic. It was a bit like the effect of a haha mirror. Her habitual image was warped under the irregular refraction and focus of light. But where did this physical effect come from? After another bout of confusion, Yin Lu suddenly had a different feeling. At this moment, what attracted her spirit was neither a crystal ball nor a mirror, but a clear and sharp eye that was staring at her coldly. The eye pierced through all her disguises, tore apart her usual image, and recorded only the most essential elements of her into her mind. She didn't even know what some of the elements gathered in it were. Yin Lu instinctively wanted to avoid it, but she couldn't help but want to see the result of the reflection. After hesitating for a while, she finally made eye contact, only to find that too much information had been recorded in the mysterious eye. Not only her, but also the stone forest, the lava lake, and the surging emotions, as well as the detailed composition of desires in the lava. If it was extended further, perhaps the structure of the entire Blood Soul Temple and even the hearts of the entire Blood Flame Order were also recorded. Everything formed a complicated yet distinct structure, which was then condensed into an insignificant spot of light in the mysterious eye. Like a star in the hazy night sky, it melted into an even more immeasurable universe. It had a real meaning of existence, but that was all. As for Yin Lu, she was merely an insignificant speck of dust on this star. She didn't even have the value of special attention. Grandeur and insignificance. Loftiness and lowliness. The intense contrast that touched her body and mind instantly clutched Yin Li's heart, giving her a shock that was hard to endure. It also caused her to suddenly wake up. The crystal ball that sealed the devil ray was still in her hand. She couldn't tell if it was cool or hot. She couldn't find an accurate word to describe it, but it was able to calm her mind. It shouldn't be a dream, right? As an ability user, Yin Lu believed that such a clear memory couldn't be a dream without reason. She wanted to believe that it was some sort of revelation. Perhaps it was related to Mr. Luonan. She raised the crystal ball once more, confirming that the devil ray inside was in good condition. Yin Lu carefully put it away a moment later. She looked at her watch and looked out the window. The car had just gotten off the high-speed magnetic rail. It was gradually lowering the level of traffic, so its field of vision was quite wide. Through the curtain of rain outside the window, one could see the outline of the southern shore of Northern Mountain Lake. A large part of the reason for this was that the surface of the lake had been painted with the color of cheap plastic. These were the simple raincoats worn by the music fans who braved the rain to participate in the event. The sudden rain brought quite a bit of trouble to the recently opened Band City Music Festival. Then again, perhaps the music fans who were able to explode in joy under the curtain of rain would prefer a similar atmosphere. The sense of reality diluted the dreamy feeling, and Yin Lu subconsciously let out a breath. A few minutes later, the car stopped outside the pier on the southern shore of Northern Mountain Lake. A fishing boat was parked there, serving as a transfer boat. It carried her to meet up with the newly purchased yacht. Later on, she would go to a specific area on the lake to do a preliminary inspection. She would make preparations for the upcoming deal with the Great Zay Order. Basically, she wouldn't spend any more money, but she had to gather information. She had to put on a show. After the car came to a stop, the driver in the front seat picked up the umbrella in the car. He jogged over to open the door for Yin Lu in the rain. In this world, the sense of service of the lower-class people was always on point. Yin Lu believed that this was something she could learn from. Especially since there was a competitor of the same kind who was born here right now, appearing by Mr. Luo Nan's side, there would be trouble in the future. Yin Lu got off the car in an elegant manner. Her heels stepped on the water film that had accumulated on the surface of the road. A cool breeze wrapped in the smell of water blew over, bringing with it the fragrance of vegetation. She subconsciously raised her eyes to look into the distance. She cast her gaze at the huge camphor tree behind the boundless curtain of water. Even though they were separated by nearly a kilometer, Mr. Jordan was still the most eye-catching landmark on the southern shore of Northern Mountain Lake. Aside from it, it would be very difficult for people's gazes to be attracted by other targets. However, just a second later, Ian Lee's line of sight shifted to a different angle. She looked in that direction, but it was not a target belonging to the Jorge. Thanks to the sharp senses of an ability user, even though they were separated by a kilometer, she was still able to grasp the most crucial element. Ian Lee patted the car window, indicating the driver to return to his original position. Go forward. Go under the tree. The driver revealed an awkward expression. Boss Ian, there are roadblocks and warnings up ahead because of the music festival. Motor vehicles are prohibited. Ian Lee didn't wait for the driver to finish speaking. She snatched the black umbrella from the driver's hand. She blocked the falling rain from above and quickly walked forward. The distance of a kilometer from the embankment pier to the camphor tree was only around 200 seconds, even though she intentionally restrained herself. Outsiders felt that this elegant and stylish office beauty was truly well-trained. She was able to walk like the wind even though she wore 10-centimeter high heels. However, they didn't know that Ian Lee was afraid of neglecting an important person. She didn't know that she was afraid of neglecting an important person in broad daylight. Her heart was extremely conflicted. She arrived under the tree with great difficulty. She was an ability user, but her legs actually went slightly soft. She didn't care about the state of her body. She directly faced the young man who was looking up at the tree and bowed down. She greeted respectfully. Sir, you've returned. The young man under the tree was undoubtedly Luo Nan. Actually, he had made a few modifications to his face. There was a clear difference from his original appearance, but Ian Lee was able to recognize him with a single glance. The reason was very simple. Luo Nan had an ancient-styled bamboo umbrella on top of his head, shielding him from the wind and rain. The person holding the umbrella was none other than Snake Tongue in kimono. The formal kimono of Sakura City women weren't suitable for traveling in the rain. A single misstep would result in a sloppy and embarrassing appearance. It just so happened that this woman named Kitayama Yuehui was wearing a white kimono. Because she was holding an umbrella, her sleeves drooped down, revealing her jade-like arms. Even Ian Lee couldn't help but take a few more glances. Snake Tongue smiled and bowed when she saw Ian Lee's gaze move over. She was dignified and respectful, just like in the past. Who would have thought that she was actually a curse master with a fierce reputation in the inner world? But why did Mr. Luo Nan find this person first after returning? Ian Lee's state of mind fluctuated a bit. This was because Luo Nan's behavior was a bit cold. He clearly heard the greeting, but the angle of his head and neck didn't change at all. His gaze was still patrolling the branches and leaves of the Zhuijia guard gate. He only let out a grunt from his nostrils in response. Ian Lee didn't dare to say anything when she saw this. It wasn't good to steal Snake Tongue's position either. She could only maintain a slightly bowed posture and quietly ponder and size him up. Luo Nan was still in the same attire he wore when he left the ship the day before yesterday. He wore a wide-brimmed hat on his head, and there was the support insignia of a certain band on it. He should have bought it recently, and his body was quite refreshing. The lush branches and leaves of the camphor tree had already blocked a portion of the rain. Snake Tongue's bamboo umbrella blocked a large portion of the rain. Even the drizzle that was blown over by the cool breeze from the lake was deflected to the side of his body, unable to touch his body in the slightest. It was as if there was an invisible barrier existing. It was quite miraculous. In addition, there was also. Today, Luo Nan was actually wearing glasses. Moreover, it was an extremely retro monocle. It was a monocle that practically no one used in reality. He wasn't like the characters in movies and TV shows, where the lens was clipped to his eye socket. The soft facial contours of Easterners weren't necessarily able to accomplish this. The lens was floating in the air. It was absolutely not a projection effect. There really was a mirror-like object stuck to Luo Nan's cheek, floating in front of his left eye. Yin Luo was walking in the other direction. She wasn't able to discover it immediately due to her angle. Special external equipment? Yin Luo subconsciously moved a step forward. Her angle changed, allowing her to see it more clearly. But at this moment, Yin Luo didn't just notice the structure of the monocle. She also noticed the special texture, luster, and even the image that stabbed into her heart. It was very familiar. It was clearly her first time seeing it. Oh no! Yin Luo drew in a small breath. She suddenly understood that this was the mysterious eye that had appeared in her dreams. Luo Nan was using this eye to observe the Zhuo Jia Wei men at this time. Just like how he had seen through Yin Luo in the Blood Soul Temple, he directly attacked the core of the Zhuo Jia Wei men. Perhaps it was because of her first impression, but Yin Luo kept feeling that the enormous plant-type mutant before her eyes was shivering in the wind and rain. Luo Nan didn't do anything else aside from watching. He was like a foreign tourist who had come because of its fame. Under the guidance of the two beautiful tour guides, he lingered on the scenic spot for a bit. He sighed with emotion for a bit before finally leaving in a straightforward and efficient manner. Snake Tongue and Yin Luo glanced at each other. They fell a bit behind as they followed behind. This time, it was Yin Luo who was holding the umbrella to block the rain. The two women cooperated quite well. There was a young man dressed casually, a beautiful and capable office lady, and an elegant and dignified woman in a kimono. The three of them were quite eye-catching when they walked together. It was just that their attention wasn't placed on these minor details. Luo Nan turned his head halfway and spoke to Snake Tongue, "The structure and design of your order is too crude. The imaginary configuration on the mental plane already has many flaws. The efficiency of entering the plane of reality is even worse." Yeah. When the order was established, it was just for the sake of a cover. Most of it was scraped together. It's too wasteful. I'm very sorry. From Yin Li's perspective, this conversation was a bit out of the blue. Luo Nan, who had been silent for 2 days, had suddenly appeared. Then, he studied the so-called structure of the myriad spirit order together with Snake Tongue. In the end, what was his intention? There's also your side. Ah, yes. Luo Nan suddenly turned his head, causing Yin Luo to instantly raise her attention by 120%. The Blood Soul Temple also has room for correction. The main thing is... Luo Nan spoke halfway through, but the floating monocle in front of him suddenly burst open with countless fine cracks. Some parts even burst forth with fine water droplets. The water droplets soon merged into the curtain of rain. If it weren't for the fact that Snake Tongue and Yin Luo were both ability users, they wouldn't have been able to see it. Judging from the material, the lens seemed to be condensed from water vapor. It was truly a magical technique. The shattered and warped lens blocked Luo Nan's eyes. It looked a bit ridiculous, but Yin Luo could see that this lens was clearly alive. At the very least, there was some sort of incorporeal power at work. Even though it was shattered, it continued to squirm. It seemed to want to recover to its complete state. Luo Nan furrowed his brows. In the end, he reached out with his hand and smoothed out the lens. However, there was still a relatively large hole in the center. Fine cracks could be seen on the periphery. In this way, the lens overlapped with Luo Nan's eyes. The black pupil just happened to be embedded in the hole in the center. Looking at it from the front, the eyes of a normal human suddenly turned into the cold vertical pupils of a viper. There was a kind of dizzying impact. Mr. Luo Nan rubbed the lens again, but he wasn't able to repair it a step further. He flattened his mouth in a bit of dissatisfaction and continued with his previous topic. The problem of the Blood Soul Temple is the same as my current problem. There's nothing wrong with a configuration design on the mental plane. But in order to perfectly reflect it in the material world, I need to find a compromise plan. This is especially true for complex designs. Otherwise, even if I can support it for a while, problems will arise sooner or later. Speaking of which, Dean Wan promised to teach me the art of creation. I wonder if he still remembers it. Yin Lu automatically ignored the last sentence. Her mind was completely led away by the phrase, problems will arise sooner or later. As the deputy first ablatum of the order, she couldn't be any clearer. In the early years, the foundational sacrificial vessel that reflected the structure of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District followed Luo Nan's judgment. It collapsed from within. The internal strife of the order was just a natural extension of this matter. She unconsciously tightened her grip on the handle of the umbrella. When she spoke again, her throat was a bit tight. Can this problem be solved? It can be. In theory, it's possible. Luo Nan responded in an extremely relaxed manner. It can be compromised with material properties. It can also be changed. Of course, there should be suitable materials in the vast world, waiting for us to unearth them. These are no longer the thoughts of configuration. They belong to the domain of creation. The difference is like a thought experiment and a physical experiment. The core lies in the cost of reality. As for the cost, it's the cost of reality. First, it has to conform to reality. Then, it's the cost. I came back this time to understand the conditions of reality. I want to take the opportunity to do a few experiments. I need your help. We will follow your will. Sir, please instruct us. Yin Lu and Snake Tongue spoke at the same time to express their opinions. The two glanced at each other and revealed polite smiles. Luo Nan didn't pay attention to these small details. He spoke with his fingers. The experimental base requires all sorts of processing equipment and testing instruments. Oh, I have these ready-made, but I still need to replenish them. Moving and the like is quite troublesome. Raw materials. Large amounts of raw materials to choose from. From basic minerals to artificial compounds. There are also extraordinary materials in the direction of the mutant species. Yin Lu had already opened up her work area. She quickly recorded and filtered suitable items from the database at the same time. The experimental base was fine, but when she heard the need for raw materials, her eyes lit up. The Great Swamp Order seemed to be just right. There's also the experimental environment. The noise from the interference of space and time has been quite serious these past 2 days. Things haven't calmed down in Ban City yet. Yes. I was just about to report this to you, sir. Chapter 803. Okira Ryuzo sat in his office, dressed in a suit and leather shoes. His sitting posture was upright and full of tension, like a leopard leaping out of the jungle, giving off an oppressive feeling of choosing people to devour. In Ban City, especially within the industry that he was in charge of, Okira Ryuzo did indeed have the nickname, Leopard Head Specialist, which was circulated in private conversations among people. One referred to his spirit, and the other referred to the old scars on his face. He did not mind this nickname, and he even intended to keep improving on this basis, because this was the medal of his many years in the field of ability users, and it was the symbol that he was most proud of. But now, the posture was still there, and he looked around, but he could not find a target to exert force on. Outside his office, his subordinates were hurrying back and forth, all moving and processing all kinds of documents, preparing for the sale and handover work that was coming soon. This made him feel even more that the foundation of his career had collapsed. To be exact, it should be a sense of powerlessness. His real goal had always been there, but in the face of a behemoth like the Amaterasu cult, in the face of the extreme power of two extraordinaries, let alone an old leopard like him whose claws and teeth were blunt, even if the entire Great Marsh cult staked everything on one throw and fought with all their might, what was the point? More importantly, just the thought of this rebellious resistance made one feel uneasy. Just as he was sighing, his secretary called and asked for instructions. Specialist, I'm sorry to disturb you, but we have received 2 quotations for the processing plant. Okira Ryuzo's attitude was strict, and his fangs and claws finally had a place to exert force. Is it necessary to disturb me for this kind of thing? I'm very sorry. Taijima, you have to fulfill your due responsibility. Don't repeat this information before the deadline for the quotations. I'm sorry, specialist, it's my problem. Secretary Taijima was panicking and repeatedly apologized with a trembling voice, very much in line with the image of a prey being hunted. She was also struggling to explain, but one of the quotations came from Director Jiang. She and some of the factory staff jointly submitted a quotation, and we did not consider this situation. Okira Ryuzo was very surprised, and temporarily let go of the poor Secretary Taijima. After hanging up the communication, he opened the quotation and looked at it carefully. The more he looked, the more he frowned. What is she doing here? Jiang Zhong, a female scientist with a strange name, was born in the wilderness. In name, she was the technical director of the processing plant for sale, but it was just a title. Her real job was the project manager of President Song Ping's private research institute, and the two jobs were actually unrelated. Oh, speaking of which, that project could be considered as the Human Resources Department of the processing plant. Of course, this was just a joke. Did Madame Jiang really think that she was HR? If it weren't for the quotation sheet, Ao Ping and Rong San wouldn't have known that Jiang Zhong had such a close relationship with the middle and basic staff in the processing plant. Judging from the labor cost of the processing plant every year, the people on the list of quotations would have to go bankrupt to gather enough money to pay for the purchase. What a charming woman. Okira Rong San is amazed. She has not been in Osaka for many years, and even has the title of remote mentor, but how does she manage this network of interpersonal relationships? Frankly speaking, at this time, Okurin Rong III clearly felt offended. After all, he was the person in charge of the processing plant. Anyone who was in his position would have their self-esteem hurt if they were unaware that a small circle had been created right under their noses. The problem was that he couldn't take revenge. Because Madame Jiang's other identity was that she was a close friend of the president for many years. She was the kind of close person that would make people doubt the purity of the friendship between a man and a woman. Okira Rong III was a little suspicious that the behavior of Jiang Zhong and the others was the president's idea. But soon he denied this idea, not to mention that the president didn't need to do this. In terms of relationship, although Jiang Zhong had the halo of close friend, Okira Rong III wasn't bad either. He grew up with the president, and he was 7 or 8 years older than the latter. He had always been the president's henchman, and could be said to be the president's eyes and ears, as well as his confidant. If there really was some arrangement, there was no need to beat around the bush. Okira Rong III gradually sorted out his thoughts. In the end, he still had to inform the president about this matter, but now the first problem was to figure out the plans of Jiang Zhong and the other bidders. Even without considering the factor of Jiang Zhong, the middle-level backbone of the processing plant's joint quotation also reflected their serious uneasiness about the current situation. For the church, it was a bad sign that they had lost control. At least, they didn't pass the confidentiality barrier. Okira Rong III thought for a moment, then dialed the number according to the contact information on the quotation list. The strange number brought a wonderful feeling. He was the actual person in charge of the processing plant, but he rarely interacted with the technical director of the factory, so he didn't even have a private contact number. This lady didn't have any consciousness of working for the Great Zhe Church or the Songping family. She was like a shadow that was neither close nor distant, hidden behind the friendship with the president. When the phone was connected, Okira Rong III maintained a businesslike attitude, but also added some elements of politeness and respect. Hello, Jiang Zhong, I am Okira Rong III. Yes, I have received your quotation, and there are some details that need to be communicated. Oh, Jiang Zhong is in the factory? That's convenient. Why don't we talk face to face? Tell everyone directly. Of course, we definitely have to talk, but Jiang Zhong, you are also a factory executive, you should understand that now is not a good time to talk between labor and management. It's hard for me to promise anything, after all, it happens suddenly, and there are considerable uncontrollable factors. The phone communication ended in a push and pull that lacked substantive progress. In essence, this round of dialogue was beyond Okira Rong III's expectations. He thought that this was a business or even political negotiation, but in the end, in front of him, it was clearly a union leader, and it was the hot-blooded version. Ridiculous. Didn't this woman say that she was born in the wilderness? She usually presided over such a project with a gloomy and treacherous style inside and out. How could she be so naive in doing things? Did she stay in civilized society for too long that she forgot what the wilderness looked like? Osaka was not the wilderness, but the conflict brought about by survival and faith would only be more cruel than the disorderly wilderness. This was the situation faced by the Great Zei Church. If they couldn't bear it, they could either escape or die. Well, an irresponsible person had already escaped first, in an extremely absurd way. The explanation from the headquarters shrine: was it really not a bad joke after drinking too much? Okira Rong III pulled off his tie and exhaled heavily, letting the absurdity and depression in his chest have a channel to release. At this time, Secretary Taijima called again. "Specialist, I said don't disturb me. The president is here, the submarine is parked at the inner dock." Huh. This place was only a few steps away from the inner dock. While he was in a daze, the sound of a chair being pushed and pulled and Secretary Taijima's respectful greeting came from the outside. Aohei Rongzo hurriedly stood up, rearranged his tie, and buttoned up his suit. As soon as he finished the action, the outer door was opened after a deliberate knock. The president of the Great Zei Church, Matsudaira Yoshio, strode in. Okira Rong III hurriedly came out from behind the desk, bowed his head, and saluted. "President." Matsudaira Yoshio was a man in the prime of his life who was less than 50 years old. He was skinny and had a casual crew cut. His slightly sunken face was also covered with a ring of stubble. He wore a casual suit without a tie, and his collar was open. He looked a little slovenly, giving off the feeling that he was more like an entrepreneur in the technology industry than the heir of a family shrine. In short, he didn't quite match the social atmosphere in Osaka. However, Okira Rong III knew that this president was a meticulous and ruthless person. Otherwise, he would not have been able to quickly rise to the top in the traditional environment of Osaka where old-school politics prevailed. In the entire Great Zei Church, only the head of the shrine and the Lord were above Matsudaira Yoshio. However, those two rarely asked about worldly affairs, so as the actual controller of the Great Zei Church, Matsudaira Yoshio basically controlled the core power of the church, which happened in recent years. Matsudaira Yoshio sat directly in the seat that originally belonged to Okira Rong III. He stretched his body and was very relaxed. "Tonight, the TCC is holding a temporary coordination meeting. I came early, so I stopped by to have a seat." Okira Rong III bowed his head again. "Thank you for your hard work, President. You don't have to pay attention to these etiquettes, sit down too." Okira Rong III thanked him again and sat on the guest sofa, his back still straight. His body was stiff, but his brain was working at a high speed. The TCC jumping out at this time gave people a very bad feeling. The so-called TCC referred to the Osaka Equal Trade Association. In essence, it was a coordination organization that was officially recognized by Osaka to connect legal enterprises and the gray areas such as vagrant exchanges. At present, it had basically become a platform for the organizations of the inner world in Osaka to obtain and coordinate interests. With the existence of the TCC in Osaka and the high and mighty Amaterasu Church, coupled with the numerous church organizations, the inner world's share of interests was greatly reduced. The ability user associations and the like had long been a mere figurehead. Basically, the size of the voice of the various forces in the world of Osaka could be more accurately reflected in the organizational structure of the TCC. The Great Zei Church was a member and director of the TCC, and had a certain degree of voice. However, that was only under normal circumstances. With the current situation in Osaka and the situation of the Great Zei Church, such a coordination meeting wouldn't turn into a censure meeting or something like that, right? Okira Rong III was quite worried. However, looking at Matsudaira Yoshio, this president who had only been in the position for a few years still maintained his usual demeanor. This made Okira Rong 3 admire him, but he also felt a little lucky. Could there be room for adjustment regarding the news about that lord? Okira Rong 3's mind was filled with thousands of thoughts, but in the end, it only took a few flashes of thought. On the other side, Matsudaira Yoshio had already started talking about the progress of the mission. Okira, you did a good job in raising funds. Currently, 17 million has been received, and the follow-up, in the next 3 days, we can guarantee another 20 to 30 million. However, a large amount of funds still needs to wait for the processing plant and other assets to be processed, which will take more than a week. A week, it's possible. Really? Are you sure the Great Zei Church can still continue until then? Okira Rong 3's heart surged with pessimism again. This emotion came so violently that it caused him to temporarily lose control. The question that had been coiled in his heart blurted out, President, is it really as the abbot said, that Lord left Osaka? Matsudaira Yoshio did not respond, but just looked up at him. His thin face did not fluctuate, and his eyes were very calm, but it inexplicably made people feel a chill in their hearts. Okira Rong 3 instantly bounced up from the sofa and bowed deeply. I'm sorry, President, I misspoke. Don't mind it, it's human nature for you to have such thoughts. Matsudaira Yoshio's voice brushed past the back of Okira Rong 3's head, and his tone was no different from when he first entered the door. President, it's a pity that there is no news correction at the shrine that can cheer people up. Lord did leave Osaka. Just last night, shortly after the Amaterasu Church's operation was suspended, he resolutely escaped and took the initiative to close the channel of communication. At present, all communication is one way. If they don't take the initiative, we can't contact them. This statement was a little more detailed than the version that Okira Rong 3 had heard earlier, but it also brought more doubts. Okira Rong 3 raised his head, looking confused. But, why? That's a stupid question. Matsudaira Yoshio pointed out bluntly, since he ran away, of course, it's because he was afraid. You're surprised because he ran too fast. Although he had always known that in recent years, his president had become more and more sharp and direct, less and less like he was born in Osaka. But such sharp words that tore apart all concealment and even all dignity still made Okira Rong 3, who had served the Matsudaira family all his life and worshipped that Lord, speechless for a long time. His feelings were so complicated that it was difficult to describe. At this moment, Matsudaira Yoshio received a phone call and turned to communicate with the other side, which also gave Okira Rong 3 a chance to breathe and digest. He stood there, looking at the president behind the desk who was calmly communicating with others, and was a little dazed for a moment. The wilderness was really a place that changed people. Okira Rong 3 still remembered that Matsudaira Yoshio was a young man who was unwilling to be lonely and easily hot-blooded. He did a lot of stupid things, and many times he needed to clean up after him. The stupidest thing Matsudaira Yoshio did was naturally to leave the family's plan and wander alone to explore the wilderness. That was a big trouble that Okira Rong 3 couldn't persuade back then, nor could he handle. It was this seriously out-of-line adventure in Osaka's traditional family that changed everything. Matsudaira Yoshio finally returned safely from the wilderness. Through those years of experience, he had gained more knowledge and skills. The once hot-blooded young man seemed to have been reborn, becoming more profound and powerful day by day. But for a long time, he became a different person and was excluded from the core circle of the family. Okira Rong 3 suffered an even greater impact. Because of his dereliction of duty as a retainer, he wasted a long time. He struggled for many years in a frontline executive department like the Vanguard and narrowly escaped death several times. But even so, Okira Rong 3 still insisted on his identity as a retainer and stood firm in his position since he was young. For him, it didn't matter how many other changes there were. As long as Matsudaira Yoshio's trust in him remained unchanged, it was the best result. And that was the truth. Okira Rong 3's perseverance paid off. After Matsudaira Yoshio took over, Okira Rong 3's position within the order skyrocketed. In just a few years, he reached the position of a special director and became Matsudaira Yoshio's most trusted spokesperson. Oh my, looking back on the past, there was really a feeling that things remained the same, but people had changed. Perhaps as he grew older, similar emotions were inevitable. In the end, it was Matsudaira Yoshio who woke him up from his trance. After hanging up, Matsudaira Yoshio reported the latest news. At tonight's coordination meeting, the LCRF's commissioner will also be present. LCRF. Okira Rong III was really shocked. The LCRF was the endorsement agency of the world's most powerful tycoons, the Dream Fund of Immortality. In Osaka, where old-school politics prevailed, it had an extremely strong influence. At the same time, it was also one of the biggest financial backers of the Peace Trade Association. Every year, through this channel, it took away several times the amount of investment. Usually, the LCRF was more aloof, just like a normal investment company, but as long as they were personally involved, Okira Rong III quickly recalled the interest relationship between the Dazawa Society and the LCRF. Coupled with the restrictions of the Peace Trade Association, he knew that the three parties wanted to meet, and the context of the matter seemed to become clear. Is it because of the blood vessel platform? Oh, maybe. Then our laboratory, the Peace Trade Association, is just an outsourcing company. It's originally just a matter of looking at people. If the production line over there changes, it's normal for us to change. Matsudaira Yoshio's nonchalant performance made it difficult for Okira Rong III to make any further comments. After all, the blood vessel platform project was managed by the Dazawa Society, and most of it was managed by Matsudaira Yoshio's private laboratory. He didn't really understand. Speaking of private laboratories, Okira Rong III naturally thought of technical director Jiang Zhong. Regarding the offer, this was a good opportunity. President, I have something to report to you. It's about Ms. Zhang's offer. Offer? Behind the desk, Matsudaira Yoshio raised his eyebrows and looked straight at him. It was obvious that he was no longer in a state of nonchalance. Yes, Ms. Jiang and some middle-level and grassroots employees of the processing plant jointly proposed the intention to buy the processing plant. Occupant Rong III roughly introduced the offer and the previous simple communication. His attitude was very proper, without any personal emotions. Originally, the processing plant was destined to be sold, and it didn't matter who it fell into. In the end, the criteria to determine whether this transaction was successful were how much could be realized, and whether it could satisfy his president. As for his own likes and dislikes, it was never a problem. Matsudaira Yoshio was not Okira Rong III, but Okira Rong III was Matsudaira Yoshio. This was his belief as always, and it was also his wisdom. Then, he saw his president smile, which was rare, so that's how it is. I understand. President? Maybe it's guilt, or maybe it's an anesthetic for self-redemption. She has always been naive. This was the first time Okira Rong III heard his president's evaluation of Jiang Zhong. Coincidentally, it was the same as his previous unspoken criticism. Of course, Okira Rong III wasn't naive enough to believe that the meaning of the two's words were completely the same. He quickly swept a glance at the smile on Matsudaira Yoshio's face, and he already knew what he should do. The newly purchased yacht soon welcomed its new owner, and the process was extremely smooth. The yacht went upstream from the Ohori River and advanced 20 kilometers into the depths of Beishan Lake. The yacht's functions were all normal, and the clamor of musical activities in this body of water was basically digested between the spacious water and sky. However, the journey to the next destination was much slower than expected. The problem lay with the new owner for this situation to occur. Luo Nan didn't express any opinion towards the replacement yacht, even though he hadn't had the time to modify the gentle wind layout of the lower deck living area. There was a clear difference from the previous yacht. For him, it was probably just a change of vehicle to sit and rest. Luo Nan, aside from the initial understanding of the latest situation in Ban City, placed all of his attention on the damaged monocle. Luo Nan said, let's first solve the current problem, then go find the corresponding materials. Then he spent a full 4 hours to repair the monocle to its original state. Moreover, he was still in the process of doing post-production tests. So Yinluo understood that the seemingly sparkling and transparent lens actually possessed an inconceivably complex structure and an even more inconceivably complex manufacturing method. From Luo Nan's mouth, it was just an imaginary structure. It was a temporary mold that needed to consume large amounts of energy at all times. She really didn't know how harsh the requirements would be if she were to use the so-called creation method to create it. It was hard for Yinluo to guess Luo Nan's experimental plan, but she was already nervous. While Luo Nan was working, she had already made a round of phone calls with the relevant intermediaries and manufacturers of the destination. She had to understand the market and not fight an unprepared battle. Since this was a relatively professional field, Yinluo didn't know whether her efforts would ultimately be able to achieve her wishes. However, when the effort people put in overflowed, they would often obtain some benefits from other sources. As she continued to communicate in depth with the local circles of Ban City, some unexpected intelligence information, especially the parts related to the Great Marsh Order, came to light. More and more details and rumors were exposed. After organizing and analyzing the information, Yinluo felt that it was necessary to give Luo Nan another report. So she took the organized information and once again entered the living area on the lower deck of the ship. It was already nighttime. Natural lighting was no longer enough to support the illumination of the living area. The warm and harmonious lights lit up, illuminating the light-colored tatamis and the most classic wood color of the wind. The entire living area was covered in a layer of warm luster. It actually looked quite warm. It was said that this yacht belonged to the president of the Great Marsh Jusher Commune, Matsudaira Yoshio. That person was famous for being sharp and callous. His family life was a mystery, but who would have thought that he would approve of such a style? Oh, it was unexpectedly compatible with a certain someone. That certain someone was naturally Snake Tongue. This Northmont Yuehui was a curse master. She wore a traditional formal attire that matched the style of decoration in the living area. While Luo Nan was engrossed and Yinluo was busy, Snake Tongue wasn't assigned any tasks. She just stayed by Luo Nan's side. She poured tea, tidied up the layout of the cabin, and did some servant and attendant work. She actually knew quite a few things. When Yinluo arrived at the lower deck, she saw Snake Tongue kneeling in front of Luo Nan like a traditional Japanese woman from a TV series. She served him tea at a suitable temperature, then she retreated with a kneeling posture. The room was extremely quiet. There was only the rustling of the moon-white kimono against the tatamis. It carried the rhythm and sound of life. Snake Tongue's head was lowered the entire time. From Yin Li's angle, she could only see her meticulously combed jet-black hair, as well as her snow-white neck and a small portion of her back muscles under the illumination of the warm light. Even so, it was enough to make people sigh in admiration. Humans naturally lacked resistance to smooth and exquisite textures. Plus, the person before her eyes was warm and vivid. She possessed an outstanding figure and the beauty of her charm. She was nothing more than a living beauty. Yinluo wanted to extend her finger over and test the feeling. But from Yin Li's perspective, the most moving aspect of Snake Tongue was that she was able to use her astonishing concentration to serve Luo Nan as he walked, sat, and laid down. She carved out those seemingly meaningless details for the sake of perfection. In terms of efficiency, there was nothing to criticize. If a company or an organization did things like this, they would be finished sooner or later. But when it came to interpersonal relationships, this method of doing things manifested a pious and pure attitude. It was as if it didn't involve any calculations. It was a matter of course and right. The essence of this method was classical, traditional, and old-fashioned. It was the morality and aesthetics that the vast majority of men yearned for. Right now, Luo Nan was sprawled on the tatamis. He was dressed like a young man that could be found anywhere on the street. But Snake Tongue's posture was clearly that of serving a noble. What era was it now? What kind of person was Snake Tongue? It was clearly impossible for her to be that type of person, but she was able to perform flawlessly. She was able to move freely and smoothly. Even though Luo Nan didn't look her in the eye, she didn't display any dismay or slackness. She didn't show any signs of acting. She didn't show any signs of impatience from beginning to end. She did her best to avoid disturbing Luo Nan's train of thought. But she was like the warm soup of a spring. She seeped in through the minuscule details. She was everywhere. Both of them were experts in serving others. Yin Lu could understand how superb her methods were. She was ashamed of her inferiority. There was far too much observation and judgment involved. There might even be some high-level sensing abilities involved. She really is a terrifying woman. Yin Lu sighed silently. She had placed an extraordinary amount of attention on Snake Tongue. To put it bluntly, it was because some sort of competitive crisis had turned into reality. The position of a secretary was far too easy to replace, especially a personal secretary. But then again, if one didn't care about the cost factor, what did it matter if there were one or two secretaries who could do things and were pleasing to the eye? Direct competition was stupid. It was far too normal for a person like Luo Nan to have people by his side. And the key to being dependents was that they each had a clear role. At the very least, they had certain functions. The value of a secretary was to deal with problems for the boss, not to cause trouble. Yin Lu was aware of this point when she became Mrs. Halder's secretary. Yin Lu adjusted her breathing and took off her shoes in the outer room. She arranged them neatly and quietly walked onto the tatami. Luo Nan was still deep in thought right now. She wasn't stupid enough to disturb his train of thought. She just knelt in a corner of the room and waited silently. Of course, Snake Tongue noticed her. She quietly moved over and brewed some fragrant tea for her. She silently offered it to her. Her posture was still humble, as if she were the lowliest of maids. Yin Lu suppressed the slight uneasiness in her heart and bowed in thanks. Snake Tongue's courtesy toward Luo Nan was something she couldn't bear. This sort of deliberate respect was perhaps the hidden edge of Snake Tongue. Time passed by in tranquility, second by second. Nearly 40 minutes passed by, and Luo Nan, who had been competing with the monocle floating in front of him all this time, finally let out a long sigh. Then he stretched his body. It was probably because he was more relaxed in the quiet space. He fell straight back and stretched his arms and legs properly on the tatami. His back rubbed against the tatami, and he wanted to do another roll. And at this time, Luo Nan finally broke away from his pure ego state. The true environment of his surroundings was reflected into his heart. He let out a sigh and hurriedly propped his upper body up. He was unable to conceal the childishness that had been suppressed to his bones no matter what. Luo Nan was a bit embarrassed, but he soon discovered that the other two people in the room were maintaining proper sitting postures. Their eyes were drooping and their eyebrows were lowered. They didn't speak or move. They were like two statues. Forget it. He would just pretend that they didn't see it. Luo Nan grinned and straightened his body. He pondered over what he should say. Snake Tongue, who was not far from him, walked forward on her knees. She arrived behind him and extended her hand to touch his shoulder. After a brief pause, she began to knead with a technique of appropriate weight. Luo Nan instinctively slumped his shoulders, but he didn't take the next step in the end. He turned his head to look at Snake Tongue. This Kursmancer, who was well known in the industry, was a dignified B-rank expert. Her expression was tranquil. She didn't say anything at all. She just concentrated on the tapping and kneading of her palms. It was as if everything was natural and right. Well, her technique was quite good. At least Luo Nan, who lacked experience in this field, felt quite comfortable. This was the case from his body to his mind. Luo Nan possessed the ability to pry into the desires of the human heart and control the mind and soul. But at this moment, he discovered that all of the fundamental changes didn't need external help. They all came from himself. Unknowingly, it was as if a layer of cushion had been placed in the bottom of his heart. Or perhaps it was some sort of stepping stone. He easily and skillfully stepped into a mental zone that he had never set foot in before. Perhaps he had observed and imagined from the outside before. He had a bit of unspoken yearning, but he had never experienced it with his own body like he did now. His heart was filled with a feeling that it was natural and right. The structure of the format pyramid, the authority of the closed system, and more directly, his absolute control over Snake Tongue determined the current state and structure. He could accept it. He could call a halt. But no matter what, he possessed the absolute right to choose. Calling a halt. It was quite comfortable. Why did he have to stop? A smile naturally overflowed from the corner of Luo Nan's lips. His body slightly swayed under Snake Tongue's perfect technique. His throat was tainted with a bit of a lazy rhythm. Tell me. What's the new situation? What a warm pool of living water. Lu maintained her lowered posture, but her mind was in a trance. Luckily, the tempo of the atmosphere in the room had completely relaxed. Her absent-mindedness wasn't obvious, and she quickly came back to her senses and responded. Sir, there's information that the Great Zay Order is hastily liquidating their assets because the dark dragon god they worship has escaped. Chapter 804. Dark Dragon God. Luo Nan blinked. What's that? This is one of the water gods in the traditional myths of Ban City. Is there a supernatural god in Saka? I remember that after the era of distortion, the conversion rate of the various civilizations and religions was very impressive. Hiss, I can use a little more strength on my spine. Snake Tongue remained silent. She just responded with more strength. She needed to satisfy Luo Nan. At the same time, she was quietly observing Luo Nan. After all, this was the first time she had been in contact with Luo Nan for a long time in the real world. She was close to the truest image of Luo Nan. She was very different from the oppressive force of the powerful ruler of the cloud world. She needed to experience, combine, and revise. Luo Nan was able to sense the intent of this secret observation, and he let Snake Tongue do it. He enjoyed Snake Tongue's service very much, but this didn't mean that he would put on the stinky airs of a superior. If he liked it, then he liked it. If he was comfortable, then he was comfortable. Similarly, when it came to intellectual information, if he didn't know it, then he didn't know it. If he was interested, then he was interested. Under Luo Nan's lead, Lu unconsciously entered the role of a teacher. In any case, she had done her homework beforehand. She opened the virtual workspace and displayed the collected information. She highlighted the key points. This involves the root of the supernatural power of the church's shrines in Osaka. According to the Shinto tradition of Osaka City, the Ozawa Shrine was not the main shrine that worshipped the dark dragon god. According to them, they worshipped the dark dragon god's desolation, which they had invited from the main shrine. It represented the god's violent and brave form, probably similar to the evil doppelganger. So, to be exact, the dark dragon god Desolate Soul has a different appearance and godly power from the dark dragon god in the legends. This difference is very important. Sakura City's Shinto tradition was rather complicated. Lu only gave a brief introduction, and that wasn't the main point. She switched the interface again, and in the virtual workspace, a comparison chart of the gods she worshipped appeared at the right time. The dark dragon god was a more traditional image of an ancient dragon of the east. There were some changes, but it was still acceptable. But the appearance of famine on the other side was more absurd. Oh, what? What shocked Luo Nan was a rather malevolent monster. Its overall silhouette looked like that of a water buffalo, but its four limbs were more like the limbs of an insect. They were sharp and twisted. Its body was crouching low, and its posture was more like that of a spider. The appearance of this famine soul is similar to the ox ghost of the ancient island chains legends. It is a type of demon. But here, demons and gods are often exchanged, so it is easy for the common people to accept it. Of course, this isn't some kind of demon. It's a type of mutant species that exists around Ban City. The mutant biologists here still name it ox demon, probably to fit in with Ban City's traditions. They are active in the coastal area of Ban City and belong to the aquatic species. However, they often follow the river to the northern mountains to hunt. Most of them come and go alone. They have a large range of activities and are very dangerous. Mutants and deities, sounds familiar. Luo Nan felt that this part was a bit familiar. He gently shook his head under Snake Tongue's kneading as he searched through his memories. Oh right. Sister Yueyin told me about it before. It was a series of general knowledge classes arranged by the Xia City branch shortly after he entered the Inner World Circle. Yueyin was talking about the world order in and out of the psychic wave network. The main content was about the distribution of power between the inner world and the mortal world, as well as the series of bright and dark rules during operation. He did mention a few things about the situation in Bancheng. Yin Lu stopped. Then. Keep talking. Keep talking. Especially about the mutual achievement between mutants and deities. It should be this. I've pretty much forgotten about it. Yes. Yin Lu took a deep breath. She made slight adjustments according to Luo Nan's demarcated scope and continued her explanation. The background of the so-called mutual achievement is this: after the arrival of the era of mutants, Bancheng was built upon the ruins. It became the only large-scale city on the archipelago, and it basically inherited the culture of the archipelago. However, a few years before the appearance of supernatural powers, the tradition of the divine path didn't seem to possess the soil to produce mortal powers. This continued until a certain ability user who came from a traditional shrine and possessed an extreme factor of madness did an inconceivable experiment. Of course, it was possible that his mind had suddenly gone insane. He used the god sacrifice ritual to directly connect his own deity with a powerful mutant that was wreaking havoc around the archipelago at the time. He prostrated himself in worship. And the connection was truly realized. He received feedback, forming a sort of symbiotic relationship. Because of this, many of the secular clergy members of that shrine became ability users in a single leap. No matter how absurd the cause was, in the end, it opened a door to the extraordinary level for the traditional power of the divine path in Bancheng. Admittedly, the era of mutants was a place where demons danced wildly, but it was more in line with the tradition of the divine path, which had always had faith in animism. Mountains, rocks, plants, birds, beasts, and even the resentment of souls could all become spirits and monsters. There was a foundation for the masses. There was a foundation of faith from over 100 million people. There was substantial feedback from supernatural powers. It was reasonable for this system to grow larger and stronger. Thus, the surrounding orders of Bancheng flourished greatly. All kinds of shrines were erected in great numbers, becoming the famous city of myriad gods. Luo Nan nodded his head over and over as he listened. Now I remember. Mutant birds, beasts, plants, and trees were used as deities. They should be used as the sustenance of a specific collection of imagination. If the mental plane possesses the rule of configuration, then there are mutants possessing supernatural powers as platforms and carriers. It is possible to realize a leap from 0 to 1. Therefore, as long as the basic conditions are met, the forms of supernatural powers are very flexible. Mr. is right. Yin Lu agreed and continued speaking. It's just that the system of the divine path of Bancheng also has an enormous flaw. Those so-called gods were still aberrations at the root. Most of them have yet to be rid of their wild nature. Some are muddle-headed, while others are sinister and savage. It isn't easy to consecrate them and use them for a long period of time. Some small orders, such as the Temo Shrine, often suffer backlash because of this. Their system collapses. The shrine that was the first to eat crabs has long since been annihilated and forgotten. Although there are many orders in Bancheng, only the Amaterasu order has truly become popular. It isn't the traditional path of the divine path. Luo Nan laughed. The Blood Flame Order was an ideal order. They had their own sense of superiority. It was normal for them to not be used to the wild zen of Bancheng. The three great secret orders, the Order of Justice, the Amaterasu Order, and the Eye of Secret Contract, had never given their position of deity to others. The Order of Justice was considered the most special. They possessed the factor of worshipping holy objects, but they also carried out the concept of complete logic. They used pure rules as a key link, and they possessed the ability to materialize. Creating something out of nothing seemed illusory, but it was actually the most stable. Luo Nan suddenly thought of something. He turned his head and smiled at Snake Tongue. Your myriad spirit order is too casual. Their sacrificial rites and incantations are all over the place. They lack sincerity. I've made a fool of myself in front of my lord. Snake Tongue was calm. Although she was born in Bancheng, a lineage of the divine path that could be called pure law, her natural disposition was callous. She didn't have any protective heart. She just used Bancheng as a bunker, and the myriad spirit order was the outer cover of the bunker. It was fine as long as it had an appearance. If she had a tenth of the concentration she spent on the massage today, the myriad spirit order would have a different appearance. Luo Nan was just speaking without thinking. He indicated for Yin Lu to continue explaining. Yin Lu changed the page of the virtual work area, focusing once more on the Great Zhe Order. The Great Zhe Order is quite mature compared to the other mediocre Temo Shrine. It is said that the dark dragon god wilderness soul they consecrate, the Great Zhe Order, has gradually grown in wisdom over the past few decades. Its spirituality is quite high, and it can even communicate with people. But it is precisely because of this that its reactions are more uncertain. According to the information, I have basically reconstructed the situation from last night. Here is an example that is more tragic than the Great Zhe Order. There is a Honda shrine to the west of Bancheng. It belongs to the Temo Shrine, a branch of a branch. It mainly consecrates the leech child god and its soul. Its influence is small. It is this leech child god's avatar that was hijacked by the Amaterasu Order last night. The entire order system collapsed in an instant, and 3 priests of various levels died on the spot. This is the first confirmed victim of the Amaterasu Order's operation this time. But basically no one has mentioned it. The 2 shrines of Honda and Great Zhe have always been publicly recognized as having a close relationship. It is extremely likely that the dark dragon god Wilderness Soul was frightened by the unforeseen event at Honda Shrine. It left Bancheng far away, and no one knows where it fled to. Luo Nan furrowed his brows. So the Great Zhe Order sold off a large amount of assets to flee with their own god. Is there something wrong with this? Yes. I feel that this decision was made too hastily. Yin Lu focused the information page on a certain man who looked very casual and confident. The number 2 figure of the Great Zhe Order is Matsudaira Yoshio, who currently presides over the affairs of the order. It is said that he is a very shrewd person. He has been doing very well in Bancheng these past few years. It is hard to imagine that he would sell off his assets in such a hurry. But it is also possible that he received other information. We need further information to support this. Luo Nan shook his head. The Great Zhe Order was just a small detail in the overall situation of Bancheng. He paid more attention to the situation of the Amaterasu Order. So what if they are from other orders and shrines? The Honda Shrine and the Great Zhe Order are already in this state. Don't they have the slightest bit of sympathy? Can they still hold on? The dark dragon god ran away. So what if there are other so-called gods? This. A voice suddenly interrupted Yin Lu as she was preparing her words. There won't be any changes. Snake Tongue just happened to pinch the back of Luo Nan's neck. She moved closer and spoke in a soft voice. Her warm breath was extremely pleasant. Luo Nan's neck turned slightly along with the moderate strength of her fingers. He asked without thinking, why? The orders and shrines of Bansheng have long since gotten used to living under the control of the Amaterasu order. It's just like how the common people are used to making a living under the shadow of a giant corporation. Some people are muddle-headed. Some people have some experiences, but they aren't willing to think deeply about it. Some people have thoughts of struggling, but they don't have the strength to struggle. Under such a general trend, 99% of the people will maintain their established path and complete the role they were given. This is tradition. This is also the basic rule of living within. Even if they are destined to be dealt with tomorrow, they will still have to compare the result of being dealt with and the result of violating the rules. Which one is more miserable? In the end, most of their choices will still be carried out according to the established rules. Her warm voice and soft words revealed a sense of coolness and indifference. It made Luo Nan raise his eyebrows. They can't even muster the thought of resisting. Why would they resist? Snake Tongue laughed softly. The appearance of the god path of Bansheng can deceive ordinary people. But who doesn't know what's going on when it comes to ability users? The various orders and shrines can only use the name of one spirit, four souls to cover up and deceive themselves. It can be said that the tradition of the god path has already become a deformed monster after entering the age of distortion. For the sake of obtaining supernatural strength, people think of every way possible to support and please those ignorant and violent mutants. These rules themselves don't possess the value of maintaining them. For many people, the Amaterasu Order's nation of gods is more interesting than the tradition of the god path that has gone astray. Nation of gods. Luo Nan heard a new term and asked subconsciously. Snake Tongue seemed to believe that she had already said too much as a maid. She smiled slightly and her gaze shifted to Yin Lu. Yin Lu received this favor with a smile. Of course, everything was built on the foundation of doing her homework. She flipped to a new page of information and displayed a tree diagram. The Amaterasu Order has been promoting the so-called Nation of Divine Treasures for the past few years. They say that the Fusang Divine Tree, constructed by true gods, has 10 parallel suns, each divine treasure. Each divine treasure is a world, and each world is the dwelling place of the gods. Aside from the supreme gods, there are also clones, souls, and auxiliary gods that reside there. Their ranks are clearly distinguished. Luo Nan instantly understood. These seats are all reserved for the shrines of the orders of Bansheng. Exactly. In recent years, the Amaterasu Order has viewed Bansheng more and more as a forbidden land. Perhaps they want to establish a nation of gods system on the foundation of the city of myriad gods. It is similar to the tradition of the god path of Bansheng, but it is actually different. It is very much in line with the cultural traditions here. As for what will happen after harvesting these mutant gods, it is hard to guess right now. Snake Tongue's fingertip streaked across the back of Luo Nan's neck. She continued to speak softly and slowly. She added, there is no need for a reason under power. But if there really is one, then the people of Bansheng will be quite satisfied. So it's like this. Luo Nan responded with a single sound. Then he narrowed his eyes and spoke no more. It seemed that he was pondering, but it also seemed that he was simply enjoying Snake Tongue's technique. His mind was absent-minded, and he didn't know where to go. This period of silence lasted for an especially long time. Normally, Yin Li's mental fortitude was lacking. However, Snake Tongue was present before her eyes. She more or less had a competitive streak in her heart. She saw that Snake Tongue was humble and calm when she accompanied Luo Nan. Yin Li didn't want to fall behind. She secretly learned from Snake Tongue, and out of nowhere, she gained a tranquil air. She endured through the most unbearable period of time. The cabin returned to silence. Only the soft sound of the ripples of the ship traveling at low speeds could be faintly heard. It gave the warm cabin a layer of coolness. Nearly 40 minutes had passed by the time Luo Nan opened his mouth again. He let out a sigh of emotion. Bansheng doesn't have the psychic wave network, but the overall structure of the mental domain is quite lively. Sure enough, each place has its own custom. Yin Li's somewhat stiff mind suddenly woke up. Sir, are you referring to? I'm talking about the surrounding environment of the mental sea. You've listened to my lessons, right? Yes. The madam has requested that everyone in the order from top to bottom repeatedly research and study it. Ha ha ha, there's no need to be so exaggerated. Luo Nan's body and mental state grew more and more relaxed under Snake Tongue's exquisite technique. He laughed and waved his hand. It's fine as long as you know a few words that I forcefully named. I'm talking about Bancheng. Normally, the mental sea is chaotic and orderly. As the cage bubbles are born and extinguished, there is a relatively clear trend. It gathers towards a few relatively solid existences. Some of the gatherings are arranged in a very orderly manner. Layer upon layer of accumulation and operation. Some are done especially well. They make full use of the accumulation of believers. Even those who don't have the qualifications to enter the Overlook Abyss district can make contact and probe in, using some of the power there. This is the meaning behind the existence of a large number of orders and shrines. Looking purely from the usage of supernatural powers, the atmosphere here is actually better than that of Xia City. It's more efficient, and it has more configurational thinking. However, it's a lot less independent. It's all the same. There aren't too many surprises. It lacks the power of barbaric growth. It's like something in a petri dish. Yeah, if you zoom in a bit more, it's like a greenhouse. This must be the most authoritative review from the perspective of configuration, right? Yin Lu memorized these words in her heart. She pondered a few times, and she suddenly realized something. Sir, are you saying that there are people deliberately guiding and cultivating here? Is it the Amaterasu order? But they've only been established for 20 to 30 years. The deformities of the divine path and the mutual achievement of each other happened even earlier. It doesn't matter who planted them. They're harvesting them anyway. No, it's like the ingredients for the meal have already been prepared and put into the pot. They can be done right away, but someone interferes midway. Let's not even talk about the operation being halted. The duck that was about to enter the mouth has flown away. TSK. It seems like I'm the reason. Huh. The Luo family's sandwich domain. It doesn't seem easy to explain. In short, it's a continuous effect caused by the interference of space and time. If the Amaterasu order has really delayed their operation because of the turbulence of space and time, then I'm most likely involved. If they catch me, I'm afraid they'll fight me to the death. Amidst Luo Nan's loud laughter, Snake Tongue's kneading motion paused for a moment. Yin Lu cast her gaze over, but she didn't dare to linger on Luo Nan's face. She just met Snake Tongue's gaze, and she looked away at the same time. At this moment, Yin Li's heartbeat sped up. It was as if there was a line of sight shining over from the Amaterasu Pure Land in the outer seas of Ban City. No matter what the situation was, going against extraordinaries would never make things easy for them. However, Yin Lu recalled the miraculous movie viewing experience she had a few days ago. The extremely close angle of view caused her to have a sort of misconception. Actually, I've done it with extraordinaries a long time ago. Her taut mind suddenly relaxed. She raised her head and saw Snake Tongue calmly and peacefully continuing her massage. What a shrewd woman. Yin Lu didn't want to fall behind. At the very least, she couldn't lose to Snake Tongue. She controlled her emotions, and her train of thought gradually became clear. She took the initiative to open her mouth and ask. Mr. Luo said in his lecture that contact is invasion in the sea of consciousness. We don't dare to make wild guesses about Mr. Luo's realm. However, Ban City is the headquarters of the Amaterasu order. Can the mental senses of those two extraordinaries probe and search? It's basically impossible right now because it's chaotic enough. Luo Nan twisted his neck, but it caused the muscles and bones of the lower half of his body to make faint sounds. His muscles, bones, and skin constantly adjusted their positions and states, gradually matching the changes of the Luo clan's sandwich domain. Speaking of which, Snake Tongue's massage technique was truly brilliant. After a new round of imbalance between body and soul, it was quite rare to see such smooth fine adjustments that didn't require extra effort. It was as if something that had always been missing had been filled up. A distorted link had been unraveled, even if it was only a temporary phenomenon. Soon, the chaos in the overall structure of the domain masked these changes. Luo Nan's sandwich domain was in a state of conflict and interference at all times. In terms of degree, it was far more serious than when he was bedridden due to a serious illness. It was just that he already understood the technique of diverting disaster. Plus, his foundation was solid, and the expanded space of his domain was sufficiently vast. The layered laws were complex and flexible. Only then did he have the leeway to buffer the changes. He didn't dig himself in. Right now, it was quite difficult to completely straighten things out. He had to expend a great deal of energy to adjust dynamically from time to time. If someone from the outside came over, they would probably be taken into outer space by the chaotic structure of space and time. It was no wonder that the Amaterasu order wanted to stop. The space-time environment of Ban City, the environment of the Mental Sea, and the environment of the Abyss region weren't obvious on the whole. But Luo Nan had messed up the details, causing the variables to increase dramatically. No one wanted to suddenly cut off the fire and air while they were cooking soup. Then a cockroach would jump out of nowhere. Under normal circumstances, even if there were 10 extraordinaries gathered together, this sort of situation wouldn't occur. From the standpoint of the Amaterasu order, Luo Nan would certainly suspect that someone was purposely causing trouble. It really wasn't on purpose. I can't return to Xia City for some time before I take care of this. Otherwise, I'll be confessing without being pressed. This is a headache. Luo Nan had yet to find a new and relatively stable body and soul coupling mode. This interference effect of messing up the state of space and time would not disappear. From this perspective, it would be good if the Amaterasu order could find him. He could communicate with them and sort out the messy structure clearly. The more Luo Nan thought about it, the more absurd it became. He unconsciously laughed. The more he relaxed, the more Yinlu reflected. I've been acting in a high-profile manner in Ban City these past few days. It's a bit inappropriate. My identity and financial channels can't be hidden from people with intentions. With the current sensitivity of the Amaterasu order, if I follow the clues, I'll be able to find some clues about my whereabouts. Also, there are many people in the market we're going to. Shouldn't we? It doesn't matter. You're here. You have a completely unrelated relationship. They won't think of me. Luo Nan looked at Snake Tongue. Look. This is a good example. We can learn from it. Snake Tongue's wide sleeves hung down. She used her palms to exert force on Luo Nan's shoulder blade. Most of her body stuck to Luo Nan. She looked quite forceful, but her breath was light. It was gentle and drawn out. Even her voice was soft and sweet-sounding. It's nothing more than a plot made by relying on the yarn of concealment. It's just a small trick. It can't enter your discerning eyes. But right now you need to deceive people. Why don't you take this object? What a pretentious fox. Yin Li's eyes drooped as she cursed silently. Then she heard Luo Nan respond with a careless tone. There's no need. But I can study it and learn from it. After coming back, the only thing worth analyzing with the lens is the 2 scarves you're wearing. Oh, you still haven't connected them together? I've tried a few times. The 2 seem to be made by nature. I can't find a place to start. That's normal. I've done a rough study before. The structure of these 2 scarves is special. The materials are special. The manufacturing method is special as well. It's a strange object that truly possesses the level of creation. Luo Nan naturally compared the equipment on his body. The biochemical reactor that he had just snatched a few days ago was a defective product. Its functions were different as well. It was hard to make a direct comparison, but from the blueprints stored in the virtual brain system, Luo Nan could tell that Luo Nan's technology was robust and that the manufacturing was precise. Luo Nan's ingenious design seemed to be inferior in some aspects. The divine binding hoop he obtained from Jin Tong was roughly at this level as well. Only the external neuron, which carried the virtual brain system, was a notch higher in terms of unpredictability. Of course, this was just the opinion of a rookie who had just begun learning creation. He needed to conduct in-depth research before he could come to a conclusion. His thoughts reached this point, and the monocle appeared out of thin air. It stuck to Luo Nan's left eye. Actually, this wasn't a necessary step to use it, but didn't life need a bit of a sense of ritual? Specific small movements could help the user carry out psychological suggestions, allowing them to concentrate their mind more effectively. At the same time, it could also affect the target. Just like Snake Tongue right now. Due to Luo Nan's direct gaze and the influence of the refracted light, her phantom image was reflected on the lens of the monocle. It interweaved with the color of Luo Nan's pupils, forming a treacherous silhouette of light and shadow. There was clearly an unexplainable and irresistible power swirling within. Snake Tongue wanted to lower her head and avoid Luo Nan's gaze completely out of instinct. But in the next second, her lower jaw tightened slightly. Luo Nan had actually pinched it with his fingers. She was unable to lower it by even a bit. Then there was a force that stretched forward. Snake Tongue subconsciously let out a light cry. She was forced to raise her chin and move a few centimeters forward on her knees. The production of this movement was very abrupt, but it was also very normal. The distance between the two was very close, but one was in front and one was behind. Luo Nan needed to turn his head to look. The angle wasn't comfortable, so he naturally had to adjust after pinching Snake Tongue's chin. Fortunately, Snake Tongue's body was soft. She was like a beautiful snake wrapped in a kimono. She stuck to Luo Nan's back, arms, and knees, twisting over bit by bit. Her arms were barely able to support herself on the tatami, and she maintained a kneeling posture. Finally, she faced Luo Nan face to face. The distance between the two grew even closer. It was so close that it was extremely ambiguous for a man and a woman. Luo Nan should feel uncomfortable. At least, he thought he would feel like this. Thought. It was this thought that proved that Luo Nan's current state of mind was different from before. In the past, Luo Nan's mind was basically free of distracting thoughts when he was conducting research and exploration. 1 was 1. 2 was 2. There was no room for other elements to intervene. But this time, his mind wasn't too pure. Snake Tongue's humble and intimate movements caused subtle changes in his mind. This continued for several dozen minutes. Luo Nan believed that he had gotten used to it, but a slight change in angle was actually able to bring about a whole new level of stimulation. A single excessive movement or even thought brought about a chain reaction. Luo Nan didn't have any decent analysis in his mind for a short period of time after Snake Tongue finished adjusting her posture. Instead, he received daily information from Xie Junping and his group of bad friends, which was exclusive to men, and it surged into his mind. It could be said without hiding anything that Luo Nan had similar thoughts in the past when he faced Cat Eyes, Zhang Yingying, and even He Yueyin. It was just that this was a normal physiological and psychological reaction. As long as he considered their friendship and mutual respect, he wouldn't think further down the line. If he had a sense of morality, a sense of shame, or something like that, then perhaps it would be useful. But Snake Tongue was different. She had a completely subdued posture. She used to be his enemy. She had an irreversible difference in status within the system. Luo Nan had never come into contact with the opposite sex in reality. Moreover, he didn't feel any pressure to communicate with her, so there was a subtle feeling of unreality. She was clearly a lively and fragrant woman, but she was like a character in a movie or a character in a game. She conformed to the aesthetic, but she didn't conform to the psychological reality. However, Snake Tongue was real. His fingers were still pinching Snake Tongue's lower jaw. There were a few minute movements as he gently stroked her smooth skin, experiencing the texture and contours of her skin and bones. There were some false elements of the effects of the muslin of concealment, but this wasn't the main point. The main point was that this method directly probed into the depths of Snake Tongue's heart. There was also the subtle feedback. Luo Nan was able to capture Snake Tongue's immediate psychological reaction. She was subdued, humble, and a deeper layer of fear and awareness. All of this was mixed together under her docile attitude. From beginning to end, it was as if she was a dense warm mist of water vapor. She silently endured everything, and she naturally dispelled the necessary reaction force. It doesn't matter what I do, she won't refuse. Yin Lu won't stop me. Right now, she was in a very awkward situation. She was in a dilemma. She and the others have considered the problems and made preparations far more than I have. Luo Nan had always been a sharp person. He just didn't ponder deeper into things. He didn't waste his thoughts and energy. But right now, there were some thoughts deep within his heart. They were like a primeval forest after a heavy rain. Plants and vines wildly grew and spread. Right now, Luo Nan didn't know what kind of expression he should display. The collapse of his mental barriers combined with his shallow experience allowed his face to maintain a tranquil or wooden state. He completely obliterated the uneasiness from his new experiences. His thoughts dominated everything as if it were a matter of course. Emotions and thoughts caused changes in the body. Perhaps it would be more accurate to reverse the cause and effect relationship. Luo Nan had the ability to sense the more detailed things within his body, but he no longer had the mind to delve into them. He just felt strange and a bit awkward. But he felt more comfortable. Extremely comfortable. Whether it was the rise and fall of his blood energy or the circulation of his thoughts, everything was free and smooth. He really liked this state. Of course he liked it a lot. Next. Luo Nan's finger was about to move down, but he had already let his fingertip streak across the tender flesh under Snake Tongue's lower jaw, moving down along her neck. Snake Tongue's lower jaw didn't have the strength to support it, but she still maintained her original posture. She didn't move at all, allowing her fragile and slender neck to be exposed. It was a posture that defied the instincts of living creatures. It was as if she was displaying an attitude of stretching out her neck to be slaughtered. However, her calm and gentle aura carried a devout awareness. It was just like this. It perfectly conformed to the positioning system of the format pyramid. It made all of Luo Nan's movements possess the righteousness and dignity of a monarch bestowed by God. Justice on the intrinsic plane and stimulation on the perceptual plane fused together. Luo Nan didn't have any reason to stop. Bang! The radiance suddenly flashed within his brain. It was as if friction brought forth wind, sweeping the surging emotions into a dark corner. The grayish-white radiance from the virtual brain's interface was relatively dim, but the information it brought possessed an overwhelming sense of existence. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment. The mast of reason reappeared amidst the tide of emotions and instincts in his mind. He rapidly outlined the complete outline of the boat of logic within his habitual thinking that had accumulated over the years. What did I do when I pinched Snake Tongue's lower jaw earlier? Analyze the gauze of concealment. Analyze it? He didn't do anything. On the other hand, in the virtual brain interface, another, new element, had appeared after the night-level internal colonization basic biochemical reactor. It wasn't the gauze of concealment. It was the gauze of concealment plus the gauze of silence. These two strange objects existed within Snake Tongue's body at the same time. It was said that they once belonged to one body. The virtual brain's interface clearly verified this point. The image of the two pieces of fine yarn in the virtual brain's interface was like two interweaving and coiling wisps of green smoke. They could fuse into a ball at any time, but upon closer inspection, no matter how much they interweaved and changed, they were still distinct and not the slightest bit chaotic. More importantly, the interface showed that the analysis progress had already crossed 15%. This was an astonishing speed. It was much faster than Jean Tong's psychic light seed. It seemed to be a level higher than the biochemical reactor. Half a year ago, he had analyzed the biochemical reactor from Liu Wei's body and found its true appearance. He had spent a total of 40 minutes. Looking at the current situation, he might be able to solve the problem in less than 20 minutes. Oh, maybe 10 minutes. Luo Nan had done a lot of research, and he had a basic understanding of the analysis mode of the external neuron. The biochemical reactor had an extremely fast analysis speed. The database already had the corresponding information. All he needed to do was to search for it. Jean Tong's psychic light seed belonged to the electromagnetic configuration category. Even though there were differences in Jean Tong's personal style and details, the general structure and outline remained the same. The analysis speed wasn't slow either. For instance, the Blood Soul Temple, Mo Luan, and Yuan X clearly didn't exist in the database. They could only start from the beginning, and they were often stuck in progress. Luo Nan needed his own understanding to be in place in order to advance faster. As for the Wraith sign, its system structure conflicted. Basically, there was no need to think about it. Clearly, the yarn of concealment and the yarn of silence belonged to the biochemical reactor situation. However, this pair of strange objects was clearly on Snake Tongue's body. Luo Nan didn't deliberately use interference waves to sense and detect them. The virtual brain system had already analyzed them, and they were naturally incorporated into Luo Nan's own system. Their ownership was clear. This is because Snake Tongue has already been captured by me. She has entered the great production line of formatting theory. She is a believer, so she belongs to me by default. Even the treasures on her body are mine. This way of thinking was pretty good. It was in line with the inclination of the human heart. Luo Nan no longer had any further thoughts. The rapid progress of the analysis was urging him to get down to business. If he were to continue, his thoughts would go crooked. He let out a silent sigh and pulled his hand back. It's fine. Snake Tongue finally revealed an astonished expression. Yin Lu, who was kneeling far away, was the same. The emotions in their hearts were much more complicated than their outward expressions. I can see it just by being here. Luo Nan gave a careless explanation. This explanation was nonsense, and the awkwardness that had disappeared all this time finally seeped out. He didn't really like this feeling. He let out a low cough and furrowed his brows. We need to do research today. We definitely won't be going to the market. Let's talk about it tomorrow. Yes. Yin Lu and Snake Tongue responded as one. Their tacit understanding was complete. But what should they do next? How should they spend the night? These two extremely scheming women were at a loss for a time. Luo Nan didn't have these worries because the virtual brain interface lit up with a red warning light at this moment. A pop-up window that had not appeared for a long time jumped out. Back when Luo Nan first came into contact with the virtual brain system, the continuous pop-up windows gave Luo Nan a certain psychological shadow. He deliberately changed the settings after he gained a basic understanding of the system. There was only one pop-up window right now, and it was just a string of flowing information. It was the language of a mysterious and unknown civilization. These words had already become the core of Luo Nan's formatting theory system. The general meaning of these words was already clear: target architecture analysis complete. Corresponding data exists in the database. Establishing file index. Heaven Abyss Code ********. Heaven Stairway Level 4. Specialized Spirit Core Production for Lamination Interference. Designer. Name, XX. Internal information. Not public. Chapter 805. TSK, it was true. The muslin of concealment and the muslin of silence were both products of a mysterious civilization. They were of the same origin as the divine binding hoop. However, the shape was more or less outside of Luo Nan's expectations. This sort of fabric-type object could be considered a spirit core. Though Luo Nan could borrow the marvelous power of the secret glyph to make wild guesses, his foundation was lacking in the end. He really could not understand the series of coding rules and characters on it. However, he could faintly understand the meaning of the name of the designer and the person who named it. According to the concepts of Earth, the first character roughly had the meaning of pillar or pillar. The second character felt like it had the meaning of seclusion or a house. How did he translate it? Liang. Liang Yin. Beam house. Liang Lu. That's it. It was more pleasing to the eye to translate it to Liang Lu. Luo Nan felt a sense of accomplishment as a translator, but this feeling soon vanished like smoke in a puff of smoke. It didn't matter what he translated this person's name into, and it didn't matter who Liang Lu was. The rapid analysis progress suddenly came to a halt when this piece of information appeared. The index had been established, and the direction was very clear. However, the corresponding information could not be opened at all. Luo Nan obviously noticed the words non-public, but he didn't think much of it in the beginning. After all, the external neuron was in his hands. What did it matter if it was internal or not? It looked like the situation was not simple at all. The progress stopped for approximately half a minute. Probably because the internal logic had taken a detour, a new round of information finally appeared in the window. Warning. Search content exceeds basic database access. The system has automatically initiated access detection procedures. Luo Nan's eyelids twitched twice. He captured the words access, detection, and so on. He instinctively had a bad premonition. He subconsciously consoled himself. The more restricted the information was, the more precious it should be, right? The virtual brain system followed the established settings strictly. Conducting core configuration nature detection. Core configuration fusion type replacement process detected. Temporary ownership change completed. Access detection complete. Holder's current access ownership, temporary. Knowledge search, expert level, pending detection. Resource transfer, sergeant rank, pending detection. Heaven Abyss network, none, not connected. Warning. Holder's access is insufficient. Index has been erased. The corresponding information has entered special protection procedures. Hey! Luo Nan blurted out, attracting the attention of Snake Tongue and Yin Lu. But he did not know it at all. He simply pressed the virtual brain system with his telepathic thoughts, but after a round of operations, not just progress, even the information about Liang Lu in the pop-up window and the images of the Veil of Stealth and the Veil of Silence that he had mostly parsed were wiped clean. It was as if nothing had happened. What the hell is temporary? Luo Nan laughed in anger. It had been more than half a year since Luo Nan obtained the external neuron. Only today did Luo Nan realize that he was just a temporary holder. What if he met the real owner one day? Would he be able to break out of his head and return it to its rightful owner with a wave of his hand? Luo Zhongheng, my dear father, this is the present you gave your son for his birthday. But Luo Nan's smile was real. The external neuron was not impressive, and so was the virtual brain system. However, it was exactly because they were impressive that they appeared too profound and mysterious. The knowledge contained in it seemed like he would never be able to finish studying it in his lifetime. Luo Nan worked extremely hard, but even though he swallowed and digested the information inside in large gulps, the water level didn't seem to drop at all. He was still unable to find traces that belonged exclusively to his parents and grandfather. And now, the sudden restriction had caused him some trouble, but it also indicated a certain trend. Luo Nan touched the core portion of the external neuron. He had inadvertently touched upon clues and directions. How about I do it all over again? Luo Nan's thoughts wandered through the virtual brain's interface, which had already been cleaned by the special protection program. He absolutely didn't mind doing a few more rounds of testing. In this sort of situation, let alone a few rounds, he would be happy to go through a few hundred rounds. The external neuron was more direct than he imagined. A new pop-up window popped up in the next second. Its priority had already exceeded the system settings that Luo Nan had specially modified. This was because it carried a must-do option. Do you want to start the confirmation and review process? Review? This word was quite tyrannical. Could it be that the translation was the fault of the system? The smile on Luo Nan's lips became even more obvious. Even if the system gave him the opportunity to choose yes or no, he only had one path. He had to dig out the secrets of the external neuron. He had to trace the past of his grandfather, his parents, and the one who might have died, but there was still a faint hope. He couldn't say it. It wouldn't work if he said it. Luo Nan forcefully severed his thoughts and took a deep breath. The flexible e-ink screen, the external neuron, the virtual brain system. He proceeded layer by layer. What would come next? He stabbed his mind and directly chose yes. The virtual brain's interface's stagnant state completely shattered, and the information window refreshed once more. Confirmation and review process initiated. The owner's genetic data has not been entered into the database. Automatically transferred to the 100-year sequence. The general education level testing system has been activated. Results have been queried. Results are being entered. Hold on. Results? When did I ever answer a test? That's not right. I answered it, but it was clearly marked with the word simulation. It was used for practice. Clearly, the virtual brain system and the confirmation and review process would not wait for him. They would not listen to his explanation. The results of the evaluation came out half a second later. Cultural Department. Results, none. Results, none. Results, none. Results, none. Direct Teachings Department. Specialization in the Configuration Department. Level 1 in the Creation Department. Overall results do not pass. Luo Nan's heart sank. The information refreshed once more. Subject specialization meets additional requirements. Calculating specialization bonus. General knowledge question bank is not weighted enough. Additional question bank data is transferred out. Specialization direction is being evaluated. Determining the direction of space-time configuration. Determining additional question difficulty to be specialization level 3 in space-time configuration. Can be lowered to specialization level 2. Can be raised to Heaven's Stairway level 1. Selecting questions. He really had to take the test. Luo Nan gulped. He was a bit nervous. If he was not mistaken, generic, specialist, and stairway to heaven were the levels of knowledge in this mysterious civilization. The system also had the rank of petty officer. It looked like it was a judgment of social authority. It was similar to the SCA of Earth. It was not easy to make wild guesses about the mysterious civilization's method of judgment. But on the SCA's side, once one's authority level was set, one would need to spend a large amount of money to obtain victory through pure capital and power. Otherwise, one could only accumulate credit and contributions bit by bit. One step behind, and one step behind, one step behind. Warning. No corresponding questions have been found in the local question bank. Automatically linked to the Heaven Abyss mirror system. Link to relay signal. Signal not linked. Signal already linked. Link broken. Warning. Link signal strength is extremely weak. Unable to link. Confirmation of authority review procedure failed. Bang! Luo Nan's fist smashed down, directly smashing the tatami into pieces. Snake Tongue and Yin Luo were both stupefied on the spot. Luo Nan's previous shouting and laughing was already very strange. Now his anger was completely without reason. Yin Luo wanted to ask, but at this time, the monocle floating in front of Luo Nan's left eye seemed to have a problem. Fine cracks blossomed on it, looking as if it could shatter at any moment. From Yin Li's angle, it was as if she could see the callous vertical pupils of a viper. They were filled with a dense feeling of inhumanity. Her courage to speak was completely drained in an instant. Whether it was Yin Lu or Snake Tongue, they both lowered their eyes and bent their backs. They just stared at the tatami beneath them like statues. So they didn't see the subtle change in Luo Nan's gloomy face behind the cracked monocle. Luo Nan felt the lens heat up slightly. The element that stimulated it was unexpectedly very far away. It was far behind the barriers of space and time, in the space of the tree hole of the mist maze where the lens was located. Right there, the torrents of information from every corner of the maze were still as chaotic and violent as ever. However, as the lens, at the center of the tree hole, the screening efficiency of all the information had been significantly accelerated, and the corresponding consumption had been significantly increased, to the point that the spacetime of Earth was affected. It seemed that some sort of clue had been exposed. Luo Nan reached out to touch the lens. The already extremely frail structure really couldn't hold on any longer. It shattered in an instant, transforming into faint water vapor that dissipated into nothingness. Luo Nan didn't care about this. His attention was divided into two. One returned to the space of the tree hole, and the other stayed within the virtual brain system. Then he saw the virtual brain system's information window undergo a new round of refreshing. It repeated the previous steps. Confirmation of authority review procedure initiated. Connection to Heaven Abyss Mirror System. Connection to relay signal. Signal not connected. Relay signal. How could there be such a coincidence? Luo Nan thought about the origins of the external neuron. It was actively connecting to this signal. There was certainly a close connection between this signal and the chaotic information flow of the mist maze. Luo Nan suddenly stood up. Such a large movement caused Snake Tongue and Yin Lu to raise their heads to look at him. Luo Nan wasn't in the mood to pay attention to them. He turned around and walked toward the master bedroom. Luo Nan's mind had already turned in many circles in the time it took him to take 2 steps. He seemed to recall that there were settings for functions like receiving signals and network links. Found it. Luo Nan soon found the specific settings related to signal links in the virtual brain system. He brought up a detailed visualization window. The details of the signal strength were clearly displayed on the interface that he didn't quite understand. He didn't understand the specific professional units of measurement, but the thermometer-style bar graph, the hierarchical nodes, and the corresponding color configurations were things that even a fool could understand. The black area at the bottom, as well as the adjacent red area, clearly meant that there was no signal and weak signal. The pointer that represented the signal strength swayed between these two regions. There were no signs of it increasing. There were too many interference factors in Earth space and time. He had to go back. The sound of scraping wood rang out. The bamboo lattice sliding door of the master bedroom sensed his arrival and automatically opened. Luo Nan entered with large strides. He didn't wait for the sliding door to close. His figure impatiently entered the transition process of the sandwich domain. He disappeared like a bubble before Snake Tongue and Yin Li's eyes. The sliding door closed. 5 or 6 seconds passed before Yin Lu finally spat out the breath she had been holding back in her throat. She unconsciously laughed a bit. This could be considered self-regulation, finally. The yacht is fine. Okay, these words weren't funny at all. Luo Nan passed through the sandwich domain and directly jumped into the tree hole space of the mist maze. The noises belonging to the material world disappeared the moment he entered. The sounds of wind, water, breathing, and the low hum of the yacht's motors were all erased. However, this place wasn't quiet. On a certain level, this place was noisier and more chaotic. 99% of the torrent of information that came from the depths of the mist maze didn't have any rules to speak of. It just poured in like a swarm of bees. Humans were essentially creatures of experience. They relied on experience to generate imagination and construct basic cognitive logic. It was fine to completely ignore the information that couldn't be incorporated into the scope of experience, but one had to forcefully sort it out and deal with it for a long period of time. It was absolutely not like what Luo Nan had told Rui Wen before. It was forever overflowing with interest. Coolness, calmness, and patience were the most basic requirements when working in the tree hole. Therefore, Luo Nan forcefully endured the impatience in his heart. He circled around the central lens body within the narrow space and slowly walked 2 laps. He took a few deep breaths in between to adjust his state. 2 minutes later, he repositioned himself to the information window of the virtual brain system. Then he saw that the indicator of signal strength had slightly increased compared to the one on the yacht. A slight increase. The number of times it probed into the black area had clearly decreased, but it still floated in the red area most of the time. In other words, the signal was still in a weak state. Also, the system had a pop-up window asking if he wanted to abort the connection, probably because the connection had failed too many times. Luckily, Luo Nan had already prepared his heart. Although he was a bit disappointed, he still decisively refused. Keep calm. The situation is improving, Luo Nan said to himself. There were 2 aspects to consider this matter. Currently, the signal link between the tree hole and the external neuron didn't form a large increase, but what about the other way around? What effect would the signal link have on the tree hole? Luo Nan projected his thoughts onto the lens. The lens received interference from soul strength, and it gradually changed shape and color from a transparent crystalline state to form a nebula-like structure. A portion of the so-called nebula was a reflection of true information. But there was also a considerable portion that reflected Luo Nan's processing and understanding of the collected information. In Luo Nan's mind, the mist maze was divided into 2 layers. One layer was inside. The other layer was outside. The outer layer was the shattered space where Luo Nan and Gong Qi had moved and fought. 1 trillion domain fragments floated within, forming a berserk, hazy, and immeasurable sandstorm. The sandstorm no longer possessed the ability to construct rules. With Luo Nan's abilities, he could arrange and assemble them in a relatively easy manner. If Luo Nan could do it, then the enormous gravitational law of the local spacetime of the Earth could be done as well. And so, a portion of the outer layer was constructed into the cloud world. In this sense, the outer layer of the mist maze was also dependent on the local spacetime of the Earth for its operation. Therefore, the natural environment and conditions of the cloud world were not too different from the Earth. This reflected the dependence of the rules. However, the direction of Luo Nan's research had never been the outer layer. According to his understanding, the so-called outer layer was nothing more than the waste that was ejected. It was a bewildering barrier that concealed the truth. The most valuable part of the mist maze, or perhaps its true appearance, was the deepest, inner layer region. It was the unknown structural core. From the long-term observation results of his father's double helix diagram and Luo Nan's observations over the past few days, Luo Nan was practically certain 2 kinds of rule systems were colliding in the core region. The intense collision caused the space-time environment to distort and fracture. The intensity exceeded imagination, forming layer upon layer of barriers that concealed the true appearance of the core region. The difficulty of observation in such an extreme environment was far too great. At the very least, his father had never succeeded in doing so until 6 years ago. The product of the tree hole project changed from a sail that sailed across the ocean to a satellite that orbited and surveyed the world. A large portion of Luo Zhongheng's later energy was used to analyze the signals emitted by the collision of galaxies. From Luo Nan's perspective, the tree hole was already of a very high level. But when faced with the complex environment of the core region, it became an old-fashioned radio. As the controller, Luo Nan could only endlessly adjust, calibrate, and cover manually in order to obtain a clearer and more accurate signal. There were no other methods that were more efficient. The problem was that even if the old-fashioned radio was manually operated to probe to the bottom, there were only a few circuits and components going back and forth. The audio signals received possessed clear rules and order. Luo Nan controlled the tree whole. There was no need to explain the complexity of the basic construction. He needed to mobilize his entire mind to capture the information flow from every level and every dimension. He needed to sort out logical clues from the chaos. Luo Nan was pondering over a more efficient method of analysis. He wanted to find an automated, semi-automated analysis method. He wanted to turn these details that needed to be sensed by soul strength into information that could be collected and analyzed by instruments on the material plane. He wanted to start with creation, but his train of thought wasn't particularly clear. And at this time, the signal link of the external neuron was like a beam of light in the darkness. This description was a bit disgusting, but it fit the essence. With his father's endorsement, the relationship between the external neuron and the mist maze was already as clear as day. It was just that he was unable to find a more substantial connection, until the signal link appeared. Luo Nan was almost certain that the signal received by the external neuron came from the core region of the mist maze. Most importantly, this signal certainly possessed some rules and order that could be deciphered. Luo Nan was still unclear about the details within. He was unable to sense the signal that the external neuron could sense. He was completely baffled by the logic of the external neuron's analysis of the signal. It was like how ordinary people were unable to sense the electromagnetic waves that penetrated their bodies at all times, but the corresponding electronic products could make full use of them. What did this mean? Thinking about it from a bad point of view, this meant that Luo Nan knew what was going on, but he didn't know why. The problem still couldn't be solved at its root. But thinking about it from a good point of view, this represented that Luo Nan had touched upon another dimension of information. Even though he didn't understand the logic within, he was able to make a certain direction of filtering based on the linked state of the system and the flood of information. Even though this sort of filtering was destined to be a stroke of luck type, it greatly increased the probability of success. In terms of personality, Luo Nan had the bad temper of a researcher. He was also a bit philosophical and idealistic. He wanted to get to the bottom of everything, and he always wanted to integrate a universal truth that was applicable to all things. But today, he was going to be a theory of results. He didn't care at all what the signal receiving module inside the external neuron was like or what the logic of its analysis was like. All he wanted was for the virtual brain system to display the words, link successful. Techniques, theories, and the like had to take a back seat at this time. What was needed was patience and focus. Luo Nan rolled up his sleeves and forcefully slapped his cheeks. Let's do it. Reality proved that once a person became focused, they had no concept of time at all. During this time, Luo Nan's entire mind was used on the manual operation of the tree hole. He used it on the separation, classification, and interference of the flood of information. It was hard for him to capture the unique characteristics of the so-called relay signal. He could only endlessly select samples from the flood of information, slice them, compare them, and filter them. Even if he couldn't increase the signal strength, he could still reduce the signal strength. As long as it was a method that could affect the relay signal, Luo Nan would search for it, examine it, and make a further attempt. Of course, he still had to make records. Since these were things on the perceptual plane, many of them were subtle and indescribable feelings. Luo Nan was really unable to reason them out logically. Aside from words, quantitative analysis, and structural diagrams, there were also large amounts of bizarre lines, outlines, colors, and the like. These were some immediate feelings, emotions, and impressions. Because of this, Luo Nan, who had always adhered to the classical realistic style of painting, had to deviate towards the modern and postmodern direction. Later on, Luo Nan flipped through the interface of the work area. Even Luo Nan himself was unable to understand psychic diagrams. Luo Nan even had to bite the bullet to recall and analyze them. He went back and forth like this. Over and over, he switched between the dual domains of logic and sensation. Luo Nan was highly sensitive to changes in information, but he was slow and even numb in other aspects. But numbness had its limits. Luo Nan didn't know why, but a wave of dizziness suddenly assaulted his mind. His mind went blank for a moment. He instinctively wanted to trace back to his previous train of thought in this moment of stupefaction. He flipped through the records of the work area, but his outstretched hand was clearly trembling. Sweat flowed down his wrist all the way to his elbow before dripping down. Why is it so hot? Luo Nan mumbled to himself. Only then did he discover that his head was covered in sweat. His body was also quite oily. But the most important thing was the feeling of exhaustion. The feeling of exhaustion from both the mental and the fleshly body was rapidly becoming clear. This was not a good sign. For someone like Luo Nan, who had the hidden danger of an imbalance between body and soul, exhaustion posed a greater threat than direct injury. Just like this feeling of stuffiness. There seemed to be an enormous source of heat in the surroundings of the tree hole right now. The radiated heat was endlessly increasing. But Luo Nan could sense that the material plane had not truly heated up. It was more like a psychological effect. This omen was not too good. It was like he was both mentally and physically exhausted. The structure of his body and soul was unstable, bringing about hallucinations and triggering a reaction from his body. Luo Nan shook his head and slowed down the rhythm of his thoughts. But he still could not help but look at the signal interface of the virtual brain system. The intensity needle was still floating in the red range. Even though it was far from black, it was still a certain distance away from the higher level of light orange. Oh! Luo Nan sighed. As for the Windows new message, the signal has been connected. The verification procedure has been initiated. The Heaven Abyss Mirror System is awakening. Huh? Luo Nan's thoughts came to a standstill in this instant. A thousandth of a second later, a cry of shush. He did not even pay attention to the window interface that was refreshing like a stream. Instead, he turned his head and stabilized the state of the tree hole and the lens in the first instance. Then, he frantically recorded the concrete structure and sensory information. For a time, Luo Nan had to record, stabilize, and continue to make minute adjustments. He had no idea whether the direction was correct or not. He was simply like a clown blindfolded, riding a wheelbarrow, and throwing knives. He was flustered and nearly vomiting blood. But a few seconds later, reality proved that his reaction was correct. The intensity of the signal continued to fluctuate in the red range. It did not change for the better, nor did it change for the worse. Of course, the link was unstable. It broke more than once in the middle. Luckily, Luo Nan was able to capture some basic data in that instant. He even had the feeling of unspeakable realm. He gritted his teeth and made adjustments, barely managing to maintain the frequency. After a series of operations, the signal link finally maintained a stable state for a long period of time. About 2 minutes. It was only now that Luo Nan, who was on the verge of collapse, had the chance to look at the refreshed window information. Perhaps, he had really set foot into the deep contents of the external neuron. The window swept through the information stream. There were large amounts of technical words that he did not quite understand. There were some special nouns that he could vaguely understand under the translation of his secret glyph, but he was unable to find the corresponding description no matter how hard he tried. Luckily, there were still some relatively friendly characters mixed in. The Heavenly Abyss Mirror System has partially awakened. Preparing for the verification of authority. The signal link strength is insufficient. There is a risk of interruption in the interactive test. Warning. Once the interactive test is interrupted, the verification of authority will fail. A second test cannot be conducted within XX time unit. It is recommended to increase the signal or choose to download it locally and enter offline test mode. Do you want to proceed with the offline test? Oh, how considerate. It seemed that the person who established the verification program had also considered the various possibilities of the signal condition. The interactive test was definitely not an option. The current signal strength was unable to give one any confidence. The misty labyrinth was fundamentally a turbulent environment. With the current signal strength, it would be far too easy to fall. Then, he would choose to download it locally. Warning. According to the verification program, the difficulty of the offline test will rise by 1 level. Luo Nan slapped his forehead, but he chose yes without the slightest hesitation. From his perspective, this was the only answer. Soon, a progress bar appeared on the virtual brain interface. There was nothing new about it. But Luo Nan was perfectly satisfied as long as it could persevere. Looking at the progress bar, the speed didn't seem to be slow. After observing for approximately 5 minutes, it seemed to be crawling at a rate of 1%. Before this thought could be completed, the signal was cut off once more. Luo Nan spat out a mouthful of saliva when he said, "Fuck." But no matter how restless he was, he could not be the slightest bit messy with the utilization and analysis of his power on the mental plane. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he could not be bothered to wipe it away. Luckily, the signal strength was restored to an acceptable degree after a series of operations. The link was re-established, and the progress bar was already completed. It seemed that there were no losses. It looked like the basic connection function was still there. Luo Nan really was about to collapse. He sat down on his butt and leaned against the inner wall of the tree hole, gasping for breath. Time passed by bit, and Luo Nan wiped his sweat endlessly during this time. There seemed to be some problems with his body's metabolism. In the end, he was just too tired. The state of his body and soul had already reached its limit. Any more and it would be like burning oil in a lamp. There would be no benefit at all. Looking at the progress bar, it would take at least 10 hours before the download could be completed. And this was assuming that the signal link was stable from beginning to end. Luo Nan certainly would not be able to endure until then, given his current state of consumption. He needed to rest, otherwise he would lose control of his body and soul frame due to exhaustion. Even if the download was completed, he would not have the life to test it. After weighing the pros and cons in his mind, Luo Nan gritted his teeth and did 2 more experiments. He confirmed that the signal link strength was stable within a certain range under the current state of the tree hole. Though the data download was still intermittent, it would take a few seconds to a few minutes for the link to come back. The loss in progress was within an acceptable range. It's stable now. Luo Nan cheered himself on. He also did some mental adjustments. He needed to stabilize his mind and sleep. But when he leaned against the solid wall and closed his eyes for less than 2 seconds, he suddenly opened them again. This won't do. Luo Nan was aware of his own situation. The self-adjustment of his body and soul frame in an unconscious state would cause interference to the space-time environment involved in his domain. Not to mention the precise environment of the tree hole. He needed to receive a stable signal at all times. If he slept here, all his previous efforts would have been wasted the moment he woke up. It was best to avoid it. How could he avoid it? Luo Nan grabbed his wet hair and pondered for a long time. Finally, he smacked his forehead. When he raised his hand again, his fingertips were clearly pinched with a fine and brilliant spark of electricity. He took out the external neuron and carefully placed this inconceivable strange object by the side of the lens, causing it to float naturally. Luo Nan cherished this strange object greatly ever since he obtained it. He rarely let it be exposed to the outside world. However, the tree hole could not be considered outside. This was a part of the construction of Luo Nan's domain. There was no essential difference between being here and being inside his skull. But in this way, Luo Nan could use the space-time barrier to create a buffer zone. He could avoid direct interference from the adjustment of his body and soul frame. It was a win-win strategy. Now, pull away. Luo Nan returned to Earth's space-time once more. He looked at the light outside the porthole. It should be late at night. He didn't care about the specific time period at all. Luo Nan's legs went limp when he stepped on the tatami of the master bedroom. He was careless, and his left foot tripped over his right foot. He fell to the ground, sprawled on his back, and flipped over. The feeling of exhaustion and weakness had completely broken through his limits. He hadn't been this tired even when he fought with Gong Qi. Luo Nan confirmed one last time that the external neuron was still downloading after passing through multiple spacetime barriers. Luo Nan quickly fainted. Actually, I should take a bath. This was his last thought. Chapter 806. Luo Nan slept, but he didn't sleep peacefully. The heat on his body followed him like a shadow. Even though he was in a cabin with a suitable temperature, the heat did not subside. In addition, his mind was overly tense. He seemed to have woken up twice in the middle. He looked at the download progress in a daze, confirming that the link still existed and that the progress bar was crawling at a tortoise speed. Only then did he fall asleep again. Oh, I think I went back to the tree hole once. In any case, the boundary between dream and reality had unknowingly dissolved in the end. A portion of his consciousness entered dormancy, but there was another portion that remained highly active. Or perhaps various brain regions took turns entering an excited state. Luo Nan gradually got used to this state. His consciousness went from being tangled and struggling at the beginning to becoming a matter of course. It extended and overflowed at will. There was no end to it. Luo Nan's soul strength was powerful. There were very few people who could match the depth and range of his senses. As long as he willed it, the entire earth and the cloud world would become his playground. Normally, under the control of reason, he would more or less have some misgivings. He needed to cultivate and research into configuration and other knowledge. He didn't have the leisure to let his mind wander. But right now, he was half asleep and half awake. He just wanted to be comfortable and at ease. How could he care so much? For a time, Luo Nan's consciousness flowed without restraint. It suddenly went to the east. It suddenly went to the west. It suddenly went to the sea. It suddenly went to the clouds. With the support of the soul cloak constructed by the condensation ring, he could move unimpeded as long as there was water vapor. He could travel thousands of kilometers with a single thought. Moreover, his mind instructs, in a second, was definitely not limited to this material world. There were 10 billion people on Earth. No matter how they were spread out like stars on a chessboard, separated by the sea and the sky, Luo Nan could see that their self-awareness was like water droplets popping and popping. Together, they converged into a vast ocean of the mental world. It was boundless, and there were few separations. This was a more interesting place than the real world. The circumstances of every second were completely different from the last second. Luo Nan had operated in the mental sea more than once before. For example, he used the dream entering technique to construct a special dreamland. He guided and gathered information from all sides to form a psychic diagram. He obtained the miraculous effect of foresight. But this time, Luo Nan didn't possess a clear goal. He didn't even have clear cognition. He just endlessly wandered, expanding and contracting his consciousness. He was equivalent to a hairy child in a dream. He constantly moved his pillow and kicked his blanket to obtain a more comfortable position. His mental ocean was still too illusionary and unstable. It was like a misty maze where fluff was flying everywhere, but he lacked a blanket that could be gathered together. Luo Nan tossed and turned again and again, but he was unable to find that comfortable feeling no matter how hard he tried. He simply relied on himself. He spread out an enormous multidimensional spider web within the boundless and limitless void. Yes, he would obviously use the Wraith sign system at this time. Luo Nan spread out the spiderweb of the altar, and the Wraith sign resided in the center of the spiderweb. It was not the master, but it had become the mount of Luo Nan's consciousness. It climbed up and down within the spiderweb, entering and exiting the windows of everyone's hearts. It drew out the spider threads of desire, weaving an increasingly complex web. Desire was turbid and chaotic, and the corresponding consciousness was also chaotic and changeable. It did not possess any specific rules. Only when an external force deliberately guided it would it form a certain trend. This was not a time of war. Luo Nan's consciousness merely drifted according to its nature. Therefore, the spiderweb woven by the wraith sign did not activate the altar frame rule of victory notification, defeat withers. It just slightly drew in the sea of consciousness, allowing it to form a rough shape. This made Luo Nan feel a bit more comfortable. Luo Nan really did feel quite a bit more comfortable. The sea of consciousness that was drawn in by the spiderweb was filled with cool water vapor that enveloped him. Hold on. How could the emotions of living beings endlessly rise and fall in agitation become cool? Luo Nan intuitively felt a bit awkward. The side of reason that was alternating shifts displayed its use in a timely manner. It captured the crucial point that he had overlooked all this time. It wasn't that this side was too cold. It was that the other side was too hot. Oh, the sun was very poisonous. Luo Nan turned his head, and it was also in this instant that his soul shone under the blazing sunlight. In the unfathomable abyss far away in the void, the brilliant sun was like an enormous demonic eye. It stared straight at him. Light and heat were highly condensed and refined violent forces. Even though it passed through layers upon layers of barriers of space and time, it still possessed the destructive radiation that could burn the soul and the heart. The wraith sign, who had appeared as a mount, was like thin ice under this brilliant and powerful light. It was like a faint shadow. It was hard for it to survive. It collapsed into a shapeless form, leaving Luo Nan alone. Oh, it's you. Why are you suddenly so lively? It seems like you've gotten quite a bit closer. Luo Nan was stupefied. He felt that this was quite absurd, so he laughed. The abyssal sun was silent. It just radiated boundless light and heat into Luo Nan's consciousness and desires, filling his soul with a unique restless power. Pfft! You're the one playing tricks behind the scenes. Luo Nan didn't quite understand the details of his perception. He just felt a bit bloated. This was most likely due to the swelling of his mental plane. It allowed him to easily toss aside all apprehensions and shackles. He was fearless as he faced the blazing sun directly. He didn't just confront it. He even wanted to trace it backwards and see where the foundation of this demonic sun lay. This thought stirred in Luo Nan's mind. Then, his mind really did trace the brilliant light. It extended all the way to the distant void. It was unbelievably smooth. Oh, he seemed to have forgotten something. In any case, Luo Nan had a feeling that he and the abyssal sun had formed some sort of resonance. This was a power of internal connection. It was like the gravitational pull of the material universe. It penetrated the endless walls of the void and acted upon each other. Why? Walala. Walala. A familiar sound lingered in the surroundings. This was a listening question, and it was also a free-point question. The image of the heavily chained crow appeared in the depths of Luo Nan's consciousness in the first instant. The chain seemed to be forged from some unknown metal. It was the origin of Luo Nan's extraordinary power. It was the initial construction of formatting theory. It was also the materialization of the concept of, my heart's a prison. It was this materialization of extraordinary power that created something out of nothing. It subdued the wraith sign with some sort of innate restraining power, giving Luo Nan the source of power to increase his power beyond the norm. And now, it transmitted this innate restraining power to the abyssal sun behind the layers of void. At least that was what it felt like. Also, Luo Nan himself had brought it over. His consciousness followed the extension of the heavily chained crow, rapidly approaching the abyssal sun. It felt like he was rapidly descending down a zipline. His speed grew faster and faster, and he could feel the blazing light and heat more vividly. At the same time, a rumbling sound reverberated in the vast and hazy void. It grew clearer and clearer, louder and louder, and grander. It was absolutely not an effect that could be formed by a single chain. Luo Nan's consciousness was in a state of unconsciousness. It was quite difficult for him to deal with the changes in speed, temperature, sound intensity, and other levels of information. In the end, he even felt dizzy. His consciousness went blank for a moment. By the time he connected the chains of consciousness, he had already entered an inconceivable world. The reason why it was a world was because it was big. It was indescribably huge and deep. The most dazzling thing within was undoubtedly the abyssal sun. It rolled, expanded, and shrunk. It sprayed out a terrifying flow of fire from time to time, and it caused the undulating flow of fire to form countless demonic and malevolent figures in the outer region. They were like living creatures. However, such an existence was not the main body of this world. Luo Nan's consciousness only paused on the sun for a moment before it shifted uncontrollably. It turned to other areas that the light could not illuminate. This other area was truly vast and boundless. However, this area was filled with layer after layer of dark chains. They were immeasurable, and the dark chains could not be seen from beginning to end. They weaved and crisscrossed, moving back and forth, interlocking with each other. They hummed and vibrated, converging into a harmony that made one's scalp go numb. They constructed a complex, dense, and boundlessly deep-sealed prison. They were the main body of this world. Perhaps they were the essence of the abyss. Luo Nan's own dark chain seemed to have fused into this sealed prison. It was the only end that could be seen, but it was also like the only loose slipknot. Well, this was just sleep talk. Luo Nan was probably awake now, but it was more like a dream than any other time. His consciousness merely wandered at the edge of the abyssal world. He was ignorant and shocked. Luo Nan had once viewed the core of his own format pyramid under Gym Master Xiu's guidance. He had also seen the unique image of the dark chains densely woven. It was somewhat similar to the current absolute chain prison. However, the difference in scale and complexity of the interweaving structure was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was practically no meaning in comparing them. If Luo Nan were to force a comparison, then Luo Nan's was at most a crude model. Its degree of precision and rigor were inferior to even the most basic link node of this absolute chain prison. However, there was clearly an extremely close and direct connection between the two. Could this be the source of the power of my heart's a prison? I think I saw an amazing fellow. How could there be such a place in the universe? Where in the world was it? With Luo Nan's current level of strength, any conjectures were shallow and laughable when compared to this world. He was unwilling to engage in meaningless conjectures. His consciousness naturally extended outwards, attempting to copy down this grand, precise, and rigorous system for further research. Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts approached the depths of the abyssal sun wheel and the absolute chain prison. They grew clearer and clearer, allowing him to see more close-up scenes and understand more of the truth. There was no doubt that the sun wheel and the absolute prison were in constant conflict and confrontation. The absolute prison constructed from endless chains constructed the abyss, firmly imprisoning the sun wheel in its deepest depths. It compressed the space for its existence and weakened its life force. But during this process, every single chain endured a violent and blazing baptism of high temperatures. The detailed structure of the myriad chains was often shattered and then recombined. The recombined structure was different from before. It was as if the sun wheel had melted and even remolded them. Luo Nan was practically engrossed in this cycle of conflict and reconstruction. This was because he saw the supreme and deep configuration thinking within, as well as the incomparably vivid demonstration of the material. Every time it exceeded his imagination, it was just right. It was truly miraculous. A subtle and abrupt incongruity was embedded in at an inopportune time. It was like a dim mark that appeared on the bright and clean surface of the jade porcelain. Simple, crude, rigid, dilapidated. Luo Nan came up with 7 or 8 similar adjectives in an instant. But the most direct noun that followed nearly choked him. It was a spaceship. A spaceship parked at the edge of the abyss world. It looked as if it could collapse at any moment. It looked quite familiar. This was the basic information Luo Nan grasped in a short amount of time. He wanted to capture even more details, but when his telepathic thoughts crossed a certain boundary, his eyes suddenly blurred. Emptiness and turbidity. Colorful light flew chaotically. There was also an enormous tension and repulsion that accompanied the chaos. It nearly burst the structure of his consciousness. What configuration demonstration? What docked spaceship? Everything was destroyed. The vague feeling of forgetfulness that had always been at the bottom of Luo Nan's heart was flipped over at this moment. It brought back memories that had settled at the bottom of his heart. It was the experience of looking directly at the abyssal sun will last time. It was the time when the light of polar domain was created in a few months. The terrifying storm that originated from the abyssal sun will crushed through the distant spacetime. If it weren't for the sealing power of the Dark Chains Dam, Luo Nan would have probably turned to ash within the raging flames of his emotions and desires. Even so, it was just a distant glance. Now, he was actually this close. I'm greedy. Luo Nan suddenly came to a realization. Everything he saw just now was perhaps just a certain point in the abyss world. Perhaps the opposing forces had reached a balance, a seemingly calm illusion. Right now, the illusion was shattered. The balance was broken. Everything entered a set state of violent distortion. Just how many details did he see just now? Just how much information was gushing out from those details in an explosive fashion? The magnificent scenery transformed into a dazzling and fatal shock wave in the blink of an eye. The structure of spacetime was like a tattered rag sheet. Countless layers of twists and turns folded over each other. This warped power was released to even further space, to even more dimensions. Luo Nan's probing telepathic thoughts immediately turned into a high-voltage circuit. An indescribably enormous attack struck back like lightning, piercing through the frame of his body and soul. The power of the sun will and absolute hell, as well as the corresponding information, all poured into his brain. There was no doubt that the power of the backlash was extremely terrifying. And this time, the dark chains were no longer insulated. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that the power of the backlash pushed forward in a crushing fashion within the frame of Luo Nan's body and soul. The first thing it came into contact with was Luo Nan's mental plane. The power of the backlash was very terrifying, but the depth and breadth of this area was quite praiseworthy. It was like a meteor falling from the heavens. Below it was a vast ocean of icebergs, desolate and uninhabited. No matter how terrifying the impact and the killing power were, a large buffer and sedimentation would appear here. Of course, there would still be killing power when it overflowed. But there was another vast buffer zone outside the vast ocean of icebergs formed by Luo Nan's God Wheel. This was the sea of consciousness that Luo Nan's altar had gathered together. The emotions and thoughts of billions of living beings from all over the world were gathered within the sea of consciousness that was gathered by the spider web. They weren't good at anything else, but their enormous numbers and loose structure were like an enormous fluffy sponge. The powerful and surging power of the backlash and the corresponding flood of information were absorbed and digested layer by layer. Luo Nan was able to sense the dual power that came from the abyss world flowing within the spider web. It flowed over every node. It flowed over the living beings that were entangled on every knot of the web. The miraculous thing was that the altar's spider web, which was the supporting structure, directly withstood the attack. It didn't feel too much pressure. Instead, it went deeper and deeper as the power of the backlash deepened. The web was woven into the complex minds of billions of people, becoming even more dense and strict. Was it a misconception? It was like a wave of nutrients had been injected in. That was right. The structure of the altar's spider web originated from two forces. The first was the Wraith sign. It could already be confirmed that it originated from the projection of the abyssal sun wheel. The second was the framework of the altar. From what Luo Nan could see now, there was an 80 to 90% chance that this framework came from the absolute chain prison on the other side. In this way, there was the scorching heat and guidance from the abyssal sun wheel. There was also the harsh rules and control power from the absolute chain prison. They interweaved together. There was intense conflict, but there was also a subtle combination. This pair of equally grand forces clashed and cooperated. They were contradictory yet compatible. Within the sea of consciousness, within the living beings on the spider web, and even within the frame of Luo Nan's body and soul, they were drawn and spiraled, ever-changing. Well, the conflict was still mainstream. This caused the medicinal power of the nutrients to not be gentle enough. After the first wave of stimulating growth, the internal conflict quickly took the upper hand. It was only now that Luo Nan truly felt the pressure. The pressure and stimulation of this information that came from the abyss settled within the frame of his body and soul. It was also on the boundary of his thoughts. It was like a wave beating against the shore, pounding endlessly. Most of it was unable to reach the shore, but the ones that did hit the shore were like a flood that overflowed a dike. They drowned Luo Nan. Luo Nan was quite familiar with this. He had been facing a similar flood of information for the past few days. However, this flood was different from the chaotic fragments that he didn't know how to deal with. This wave of flood gradually eroded, seeped, decomposed, and absorbed within the spider web. Slowly, it became clear and logical, forming a vague framework of knowledge. Layer after layer of structure was piled up. Order. The most beautiful order. Even though it was heavy to the point of being hard to bear, it made one unable to stop. Luo Nan let out a long breath. His various planes of consciousness awakened one after another under the control of order. He unwittingly became completely clear-headed. He opened his eyes. The flat ceiling of the cabin was reflected in his eyes. There was also the blood-like sunset that penetrated through the porthole. The information of the material world was rich and vivid. It was most suitable for humans to receive and understand. It was just that Luo Nan turned a blind eye to it. Instead, he gave up the easy for the difficult. He went to decipher the enormous information structure that still settled within the frame of his body and soul, the altar's spider web. He made appropriate associations and extensions. Luo Nan naturally thought of his own situation. He was probably the primary martial arena of the conflict between the sun wheel and absolute prison in the spacetime of Earth. It had been going on for a very long time. The configuration system and the wraith sign system. Reason and emotions. Rules and chaos. Wasn't this the case? There was also the mist maze. The current Luo Nan could make a clearer judgment of the core area of the mist maze. Conflict, distortion, coexistence. It was very similar. Needless to say, there was also the broken spaceship, which could prove it on another level. There could be a lot of spaceships, but it was almost identical to the outer space spaceship, one of the two major satellites in the virtual brain interface. It couldn't have been a damn coincidence, could it? Everything was linked together. The abyss world was the source of everything. Once Luo Nan comprehended this, his understanding of the information of the mist maze naturally rose to a higher level. This was the essential reason why the spider web was able to digest and absorb the information. Oh, the altar's spider web structure itself seemed to be very suitable for a further understanding of the chaotic information of the mist maze. Machines and programs were unable to decipher information that was overflowing with contradictions and conflicts. But life with spiritual intelligence, especially humans, seemed to be naturally prepared for this information. Actually, the vast majority of people did not possess the qualities to analyze complex information. But within the altar's spider web system, they were equivalent to lab rats. Luo Nan could observe the effects they received and make reverse deductions. From there, he could filter, precipitate, and wash out the most useful results. At this moment, Luo Nan's train of thought, which had always been unclear, became much clearer. Light flashed. Not good. There were far too many bursts of inspiration. He needed to memorize them all and go back to experiment with them one by one. Luo Nan wanted to get up and take notes, but he was unable to get up when he exerted force. The muscles and tendons involved in exerting force seemed to have completely lost their elasticity. They were sluggish and powerless. He took a deep breath and forcefully increased his strength. Finally, he raised an arm and placed it in front of his eyes. The cuffs of his sleeves were already drenched in sweat. The exposed arm was actually swollen by a size compared to before. His fair skin was now crisscrossed with blue and purple. Some of the subcutaneous tissues had already been destroyed, oozing with blood. This feeling. It was like someone had beaten him up while he was asleep. And so Luo Nan knew that the progress in the direction of the mist maze was not something that could be obtained casually. The frame of body and soul, especially the skeletal side, had already walked a full circle around the edge of the cliff. Luo Nan just raised his arm like this. He was a bit stunned. He wasn't frightened by the miserable scene. Instead, he thought of something else. In the past, he felt that the information of the double helix left behind by his old man did not completely and clearly explain the essence of the structure of the mist maze. He felt that the research was incomplete because he lacked the strength and time. But with this, his train of thought suddenly took a huge turn.